This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by.
The London Assembly is the voice of London, composed of 25 members elected at the same time as the Mayor in order to hold him to account and to scrutinise his policies. This is a Mayor's Question Time meeting of the Assembly, which means that all members are invited to attend and ask questions of the Mayor. Can I welcome members, officers and the public here in the gallery and watching on the webcast. In case of emergency and any need to exit the building, guests seated in the public gallery should follow security staff and Assembly members should follow the meeting clerk. Please may I remind you to silence your devices, and can I ask the Mayor and members to position their microphones so that they can be heard clearly, and moving it closer to you by picking it up from the base, not the neck of the microphone. Members are reminded that any electronic devices should not be placed in front of microphones, which must be turned on to speak and turned off once finished. Members are also reminded to turn off any mobile hotspots for the duration of the meeting. Can I now ask Rebecca Arnold to confirm any apologies for absence?
Thank you, Chair. We have apologies today on behalf of the Deputy Chair, Assembly Member Duval, Assembly Members Ahmad and Moema.
Firstly, thank you. Can I welcome to the public gallery BA journalism students from the London Metropolitan University and the PA Media Academy. Good morning and welcome. I'd also like to welcome the Merton Ukrainian Refugee Hub, and who I'd wish to say, Dobrego ranku, laskawo prosimo. Since we last met for September's Mayor's Question Time, we have been busy at party conferences, but we have also been busy here. The Health Committee examined which groups of people are disproportionately impacted by oral health inequalities and what preventative measures are in place across London to address those inequalities. The Housing Committee published its Affordable Housing Monitor for 2023-24 and met to discuss those findings. The Environment Committee discussed the steps the Mayor is taking to reduce emissions to net zero by 2030 and held a Q&A with the new Deputy Mayor for Environment and Energy, Mete Koban. Public rail ownership was the topic of the Transport Committee meeting. It also questioned the Deputy Mayor for Transport and TfL about the ongoing cyber incident at TfL. The Elections Review Working Group asked representatives from London boroughs and agents and political organisers about their experience of the 2024 Mayor of London and London Assembly elections. Assembly members visited the Queen Elizabeth Olympic Park, where they heard from the LLDC's head of sustainability on the corporation's climate action strategy and sustainability work, and that was, I think, the wettest site visit I've been to in a long time. The Police and Crime Committee met to review how the Met manages public order policing at large-scale events, and the Planning and Regeneration Committee investigated into how social value is considered in planning decisions using the example of markets and arches. So we have been busy. The public all think we go on holiday for the conference season, and just to prove that things do happen. Can I ask the Assembly to note the interest set out in at item 2? And do Assembly members have any other disclosable pecuniary interests which relate to the items on the agenda for today's meeting, or any other relevant interests, including any declarations in relation to gifts and hospitality which are not reflected on the authority's register of gifts and hospitality? Assembly Member Wilson, please.
Thank you, Chair. It's not noted on the register yet because I haven't updated the form because I haven't got a figure for it, but I was provided with transport by the BBC so I could take part in any questions a couple of weeks ago.
Thank you very much. Any other members? Thank you. Can I ask the Assembly to confirm the minutes of the London Assembly Mayor's Question Time meeting held on the 12th of September 2024 to be signed by me as a correct record? All right. Can I ask the Assembly formally to receive the Mayor's report covering the period from the 30th of August to the 26th of September 2024?
Yes, indeed.
The Mayor will now provide an oral update of up to 5 minutes in length on matters occurring since the publication of his report.
Good morning. Chair, the President of Ukraine's, President Zelensky, is in London today meeting the Prime Minister. I'm sure he'd appreciate your comments in Ukrainian. It sounded more Arabic to me, but my Ukrainian's not very good. The issues I'd have dealt with in my opening statement are raised in questions later this morning, so I'll go straight to the oral update requested by Senator Member Roberts. I want to thank Amy LeMay for everything she's done as the capital's nightman. She's worked hard to help London's nightlife through huge challenges, including Brexit, the pandemic, the cost of living crisis and the cost of doing business crisis. I'm committed to supporting the capital's life at night, and work continues at City Hall and our partners to support all aspects of life between 6 p.m. and 6 a.m. The forthcoming London Nightlife Task Force will examine and address the issues facing nighttime industries. Any decisions on the Night Tsar role will be taken once they've completed their work.
Thank you. Could I ask Assembly Member Roberts, please, to ask a question?
Thank you for that reply, Mr. Mayor, and good morning. I think it's widely accepted that there were some questions regarding the previous appointment and the democratic accountability contained therein. So, should you choose to reappoint or fill the vacancy in the Night Tsar role, will you ensure that any future appointment to the role will be made as a political appointment in order to allow robust scrutiny by the Assembly without fear of breaching employment law, as was a recurring problem with Ms LeMay's appointment?
Chair, you'll be aware political appointees are set out in the GLA Act, but I'm more than happy for members to lobby the government for me to have more political appointees. I'd be more than happy to have more appointees I can appoint politically. It can even be a cross-party endeavour for us to get me more political appointees.
Assembly Member Bakari, please.
Thank you. Only 23% of venues in London were open past midnight on a Saturday, according to research. So do you still stand by your statement that London is leading the world in its 24-hour policy? And will this be a main priority for the new appointee, if selected?
Well, some of the achievements over the last 8 years, including the most comprehensive nighttime evidence base of any city in the world. We've got over 2,600 venues to sign up to the Women's Night Safety Charter, relevant to those who are out and about during the course of the night. We've also supported those venues at risk with our culture and community space programme and funding to the tune of £2.3 million. Most boroughs now have a nighttime strategy. It wasn't the case a number of years ago. And we will make sure we continue to have the night surgeries once we have had the task force report in, should that be one of the recommendations. But I'll make sure, Chair, that the Assembly are kept abreast of developments with the work of the task force, because there's clearly a keen interest in this matter in central, inner and outer London.
Thank you for that. We now move to questions on the priority order paper. Each group is allocated an amount of time to ask questions that is proportionate to their size. The first question is aligning the budget with manifesto commitments, from Assembly Member Mahfouz.
Thank you, Chair. As the new Cabinet has come into office and opened up the books across their departments, it's become clear that the economic inheritance left by the previous government was even worse than we could have imagined. There's currently a £22 billion black hole in the public finances due to the sheer scale of mismanagement and neglect seen under the previous government, and this will take some time to rectify. On top of this, the last government left a UK economy that has been flatlining for years, seen little to no growth and low levels of investment. As a consequence, the Chancellor will have to make some tough choices in her first budget this October and at the spending review next spring. But there is good news. I'm confident that this government gets it. They know London is the key to turbocharging growth across the country. I want to work with London rather than against us, as the previous government did. Over the last 3 months, they've already shown some real commitment to delivering growth in the capital, including working with us to deliver new housing at Cockfosters, which the previous government didn't want to build, and backing our plans to transform Oxford Street. The Chancellor has outlined London's importance to the UK and our role in helping deliver the government's growth mission. I look forward to continue to work closely with her and the Prime Minister to maximise London's potential. Clearly, there are some immediate priorities for London, including securing a funding settlement for TfL and kick-starting some vital projects to unlock housing and growth. Well, I'm not going to provide a running commentary on our discussions with the government. I will always make the case for our city. As I said previously, we're at the beginning of what I know will be a long and fruitful relationship. the scale and change we need to see is not going to happen, I'm afraid, overnight.
That's very positive to hear, Mr Mayor, of all the progress that you've made in the short period of time that you've been working alongside a Labour government. Of course, earlier this year, you secured that historic third term as Mayor, and you did that on an ambitious election platform and manifesto which promises to make London a safer, fairer, greener city. In terms of that fairness, I just wanted to focus on that for a moment. You're making significant efforts to support struggling Londoners and reduce inequality. Could you outline what action, first of all, that you are taking in this regard, and secondly, what you're hoping from the Chancellor in terms of what you will see from them later this year?
Thanks for the question and the comments. Just this week, I was with Anne Clark, the leader of Camden Council, some great volunteers at Little Village, which is an example of us supporting a great organisation to the tune of almost £100,000 this week, to support them, support families as winter approaches, and families have got to, buy winter coats, prams, welly boots, and all those sorts of things. A few weeks ago, we supported the Felix multi-bank to the tune of £250,000 to support families across London who need support. And actually, Felix and Little Village are working together to try and use their resources. We've also given support to our law centres, really important, so Londoners can maximise their incomes. You'll be aware, and it's a source of pride and note to you because of your personal background, we announced that the universal free school meals provision in primary schools, state primary schools, is going to be extended, really important going forward. We're keen to make sure more Londoners have the skills to get better paid jobs. So we're going to carry out investment in the adult education budget, at the same time trying to build more affordable homes. These are the sorts of points we're making to the Chancellor in relation to the challenges in London to try and ameliorate some of the cost of living crisis we know happens even worse, the effects in winter. And we're hoping some of those points lands with the Treasury. And as ever, when I write to the Chancellor, I'll make public my representations so Londoners can see the sorts of things I've been lobbying for.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Really hit the ground running in terms of those past few months, and certainly when I was there with you and Gordon Brown launching that first multi-bank in London, I know what a massive impact that's going to make for parents with young children, especially that very difficult stage in terms of supporting those young people get the best start in life. Last month, I also had the honour and pleasure of visiting Ealing Advice Services in my borough, who have just received additional GLA funding from yourself to carry out the vital work. And I've seen firsthand, both from working in the sector but also visiting services like Ealing Advice Services, how needed their services are, what an impact their work does on a day-to-day basis. And we've seen, as you talked about, 14 years of the economy flatlining, the challenges that people are really struggling with as a consequence of the previous Conservative government. So I wanted to ask you in terms of what you feel that the new government's upcoming budget can do to help ensure the right advice and advocacy services are in place to support Londoners during this cost of living crisis.
A really important point that you've seized is that many Londoners are eligible for benefits they're not applying for. And you've seen this with your visits to the Advice Centre, but also your experience, bearing in mind your previous job. What we're going to do is ensure that Londoners apply for the benefits they're eligible for. And so we're working with the government to highlight eligibility for the pension credit, for example. Last year we were very successful in getting thousands of Londoners, I think, to the tune of £17 million, applying for pension credit they otherwise wouldn't get, which is a passport to getting winter fuel allowance and other benefits. So we'll be working with the government in relation to those issues. The second issue, which I know you'll be pleased about, is the new Justice Secretary, the Lord Chancellor. She understands the importance of access to justice. In my view, it's one of the pillars of the welfare state, people being able to access their legal rights. And I'm hoping that the Lord Chancellor and Justice Secretary will be able to announce in the forthcoming months and years a widening of access to justice, which has been a big issue for many of your constituents and Londoners who have got rights and eligible for things but can't access them because of a lack of legal advice and language competency and so forth.
Thank you very much, Mr Mayor, for all the work you're doing on this.
Assembly Member Garrett, please.
Morning. Thinking about requests that you're making of government, you previously made it very clear that London needs, in your view, £4.9 billion a year for 10 years for funding for affordable housing. That was a request that you made of the previous government. Have you made the same request of the new government?
So the Deputy Minister for Housing has met regularly with CLG. In fact, we had a meeting yesterday with some of their officials in relation to funding ask. I think the task force he set up revised that figure to circa £4 billion, and that's the figure we'll be using in relation to conversations with the government. The member will be aware.
Sorry, you've reduced what you're asking for from the new government?
No, I've not reduced what I'm asking for.
So you're still asking for £4.9 billion a year for 10 years for housing?
The task force has amended their figure from £4.9 billion to £4 billion. We'll be using the figure the task force has given us.
So is that a total of £4 billion or an annual sum of £4 billion?
That's the figure the task force advised we need over the course of the next 10 years in relation to addressing some of the challenges posed by the perfect storm in the housing market.
Sorry,
that's separate from the ask we have in relation to a future affordable housing programme, which you'll be aware about, which starts in 26. We'll start conversations very soon because the spending review next spring will determine the next affordable housing programme. So our request isn't limited to the next 10 years request from the task force, but it includes that.
Okay, so you've avoided my question. So I'm going to assume you're not still making that request of £4.9 billion a year for 10 years. We were looking at the things that the Labour group here have been asking for. Of all the motions that the Labour group have asked for over the last term, those 3 years, that totalled £4.64 billion. Included among that was £1.5 billion for TfL. Are those requests that you've specifically put to the new government?
I'm not aware of those figures, no.
You're not aware of what the Labour group are doing? I mean, surely you follow closely the request that they make of government, don't you?
I'm not aware of the figures you've read out.
So you're not asking the government for the £1.5 billion for TfL that the Labour group sitting over there asked for?
I'll be publishing, as I do every year, the request I make of the government in advance of the budget, and that'll be public in due course.
OK. Are you still asking for the £500 million a year vehicle excise duty that's from London drivers that doesn't go to London?
I'll be publishing the letter to the Chancellor in due course, and I know he's impatient, but it'll be published in the next couple of weeks.
OK. So, I mean, the overarching question that I had was whether, since the election, you're still standing up for London, or whether you're watering down your requests and dialling back what you're asking for so as not to embarrass your new friends in government. I think you've been very clear, Mr Mayor, you have done exactly that, and you're letting London down by dropping all of these big asks that you've had for government going back many years. I think, for once, I've had a very clear answer to my question, so I will leave it there. Thank you, Chair.
Chair, if I could respond to
You've already responded, Mr Mayor. You've made it very clear that you're not making those requests.
It's reasonable that the Mayor can come back on that. Rather long flourish.
I gave him plenty of time to answer those questions, and he refused. He said, wait for a statement that's coming out. So we will all have to wait for that statement and see what watered-down requests there are.
It's reasonable that the Mayor replies.
He's got all cleverly, hasn't he, Chair? So let me deal with the assertion made by the member in relation to standing up for London and Londoners, which is the assertion made in the question. So I'm really pleased that in the King's speech published not too long ago, many of our asks were set out in bills announced in the King's speech. Also, notwithstanding the fact there's going to be a budget in October, we've already had 1,000 additional electric vehicle buses coming to London being announced. We've already had additional housing announced, and I'm really pleased that the government is indicating that we'll have a leading role in the London Investment Summit taking place next week. Just some of the examples of the fruits of a Labour government in just under 3 months.
Not one of those is an example of a thing that the Mayor is asking for, exactly as I said 1 minute ago. Thank you, Mr Mayor, for your very clear answer.
Thank you.
I think you'll find I was asking for more electric buses in London and more housing in London, both of which this government's ceded to.
Thank you. Assembly Member Cooper, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. Mr Mayor, I wondered if you'd like to just do a quick comparison for us in terms of standing up for London since 2016 with the previous Mayor of London, who apparently, I believe, gave away quite a number of things to the then Prime Minister David Cameron and the then Chancellor George Osborne that has led to a number of problems, for example, the operating grant for TfL and so on.
Well, we saw some of the problems with the previous Mayor and the previous Conservative Prime Minister. He wouldn't say boo to a goose in relation to the £1 billion cut from policing. in relation to the massive cuts in the fire service, in relation to the affordable housing programme being cut. But also we know, actually, the first 3 months after Theresa May being Prime Minister, Boris Johnson being Prime Minister, Liz Truss being Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak being Prime Minister,
I don't think we've got time to list them all.
We didn't achieve anything like what we've achieved in the first 3 months of Keir Starmer, and that shows the reasons for optimism amongst Londoners and why they're so sour this morning. They must all be Team Cleverly.
I couldn't possibly comment on that, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. The next question concerns the nighttime economy and is in the name of Assembly Member Best, please.
Thank you for your question. Since we got the night tube up and running in 2016, following delays under the previous mayor, it's been an enormous success, with millions of customers making journeys every Friday and Saturday night. Its huge benefits have been far-reaching, allowing customers to travel safely and confidently, supporting jobs and boosting the economy by hundreds of millions of pounds. Since the launch, we've extended night services significantly. They now run on Friday and Saturday nights on the Central, Jubilee, Northern, Piccadilly and Victoria lines. The night overground also runs on Friday and Saturday night between Highbury and Islington and New Cross Gate, part of which will soon be known as the Windrush line. Given the success of the night tube, I've asked TfL to keep night tube services under review, and I made it clear I'd like to see the service expanded to support the running of our city's late-night economy when circumstances allow. Changes like this require complex planning, and as well as funding, there are a range of other considerations that have to be made before expanding services further. The introduction of the night tube saw many significant changes to London Underground inspection and maintenance work, condensing what was once 7 days of work into 5. Shift patterns for this work now avoid Friday and Saturday nights on night tube service lines, with essential work being redirected to other areas of the network. So one consideration is the impact of further condensing this vital work, which used to take 7 nights, into 4 nights to accommodate a late night service on Thursdays. TfL conducts continuous assessments which monitor how Londoners use this network. While I'm pleased to say that ridership numbers are recovering after the effects of the pandemic, data suggests that there have been significant changes in the way people travel in its aftermath. Demand for late evening services between 10 p.m. and around 12:30 a.m. remains approximately 20% higher on Fridays and Saturdays than it does on Thursdays. Nonetheless, TfL and I remain committed to the important role our public transport network plays in growing London's nighttime economy to allow Londoners to enjoy all our capital has to offer and get home safely into the night. In addition to night tube and night overground services, TfL also runs an extensive night bus network every night of the week, offering safe, accessible and reliable journeys to customers. We'll continue to keep these under review also.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Obviously, Thursday is the new Friday for many Londoners, and the push for a night tube on Thursdays will only increase. I know you've just spoke to Assembly Member Garrett about having to wait for the figures, but I truly hope that an ask for TfL and the ability to use those services might be something you consider.
Can I just say, I'm really sympathetic to the point she makes and the way she says it. And can I reassure her I'll keep it under review, and I'll be more than happy to work with her in relation to updates going forward.
Thank you. I look forward to that. Mr. Mayor, you may have seen that last Friday I published a report fixing London's nightlife with many industry stakeholders on a non-political basis, and I really hope that's a report that you can look at, and I'd like to send you a copy and hear your thoughts on that, as well as making sure that going forward with the Nightlife Task Force that you invite those stakeholders that have contributed to that report to contribute to your own review of what you're doing with nighttime economy.
Chair, the members had a long-standing interest in this area. I've not seen the report yet. Apologies, it's my fault, not hers. I will look at the report with keen interest and make sure both she and those she spoke to are spoken to as part of that work. It's really important we work together to try and reinvigorate the nighttime economy. I'm more than happy to do that.
Thank you.
Assembly Member Small-Edwards, please.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Mayor, are you surprised that Assemblymember Best's report ignores the role played by Brexit and the last government's economic mismanagement in posing challenges to London's nighttime economy?
Chair, I've got to confess, I've not read the report, but I do know the impact Brexit has had on the nighttime economy. He'll be aware many of those that worked in the cultural and hospitality sector were Londoners who originated from the European Union. Many returned to country of origin. We also know that many of those were freelancers, casual workers, and the pandemic meant they didn't have the monies to pay their bills because many of the places of work had closed down during the pandemic, and they weren't able to secure some of the financial support others in more permanent jobs were able to support. So they then secured other jobs outside the nighttime economy and then didn't return to those jobs in the nighttime economy once the nighttime economy reopens. There's massive shortages both labour shortages and skills shortages as well. On top of that, we know the huge increase in business rates. The cost of doing business is a big challenge to those in the nighttime economy, and that's aside from the utility bills. So all these are part of the perfect storm that's affected the nighttime economy, not just, by the way, in this country, but across the globe. People are considering how to grapple with this post-pandemic. And so one of the things we'll be doing as part of the work with the task force, I'm hoping, is to look at lessons elsewhere to make sure we can make sure we have a system in London that's fit for purpose, noting the additional challenges we have with Brexit.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Assembly Member Bess.
Yeah, thank you.
On a point of personal explanation.
Yes, thank you. The report was obviously led by industry stakeholders, and I couldn't put in there anything they didn't mention. They didn't mention that. What they did mention was places like Manchester, where nightlife is booming, and I believe Brexit also took place across the country. And we've made sure to recognise the good work that's happened in places like Manchester, where I believe there's a Labour mayor using a great nighttime advisor, Sasha Lord, who does that work on a voluntary basis. And so I hope that we can learn some of the lessons from other cities in the country when we look at the night time. And I'm glad the Mayor had a positive response. I hope the Labour members also have that positive response instead of trying to nitpick over people trying to fix London's dwindling nightlife economy.
Thank you. The next question concerns net zero targets and advertising on the TfL network, and that's in the name of Assembly Member Russell, please.
Thanks for your question. We must do all we can to rapidly reduce the use of fossil fuels, which is why I set a 2030 net zero target for London and signed the Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty. I've always been clear that fossil fuel companies must either get on board or get left behind. Just one example of this in London is how I've divested our pension funds from extractive fossil fuels, making London one of the only cities in the world to have done so. TfL has a major role to play in decarbonising our city, and I'm determined that every lever is pulled to do that through changes to TfL operations. Under my guidance, TfL is transitioning to an entirely zero-emission bus fleet by 2030, building on our work to create what is now the largest zero-emission bus fleet in Western Europe, moving towards green energy using power purchase agreements, removing fossil fuels from heating systems and delivering energy efficiency across the estate, working with partners to get the 40,000 electric vehicle charging points in London, building on a network that already makes up a third of the whole country's EV charging points, and supporting green jobs in the transport and wider sectors. TfL maintains a comprehensive and rigorous advertising policy and copy review process and follows the Advertising Standards Authority, ASA, and Committees of Advertising Practice, CAP, guidance to ensure advertisements are not misleading. Advertisers must follow this guidance, and CAP advice must be sought on all advertising related to fossil fuel extraction and environmental claims. Then all advertising copy that includes an environmental claim or is from brands associated with fossil fuel extraction is referred to TfL by the media partners, so they can be sure that the guidance is being followed correctly in these cases, and particularly to ensure advertisements are not misleading. If any new guidance on fossil fuel advertising is provided by the ASA, TfL will of course follow that. I'll continue to work with TfL on its approach to advertising on its network to ensure it supports my ambition for London to be net zero by 2030. The Deputy Mayor for Transport sits on TfL's advertising steering group, which regularly considers any updates to advertising policy.
Mr. Mayor, that just sounds like rather a lot of excuses. You have reeled off a load of practical things that TfL is doing to decarbonise its own actions. This question is about the actual products that are being advertised on the TfL network. You've talked about the Advertising Standards Authority, the Committees of Advertising Practice, all their guidance about whether adverts are misleading or not. I'm not talking about whether adverts are misleading or not. I'm talking about the harm of advertising fossil fuel products like SUVs, flights for holidays, that kind of thing. Now, in 2019, just after you declared a climate emergency, I raised this issue of fossil fuel adverts, and you said TfL is looking at how it can ensure that its advertising estate is not used by those that have the most detrimental impact on the environment. Now, it's been 5 years since then. Are you going to get TfL to stop running these climate-busting adverts on the TfL network?
So TfL always keeps its policies under review, and she'll be aware that the regulators, the ASA and CAP, their guidance is being followed, and we're going to carry on keeping our adverts under review, just like we did with foods high in fats, sugar and salt and body shame adverts. We're going to carry on keeping all adverts under review, and that includes adverts to do with the issue that she's raised in the question.
Absolutely. You've been able to make a change to your policy in terms of products high in fats, salt, sugar, etc. You've also, and I'm very grateful for this, dealt with adverts coming from authoritarian regimes. Now, you don't advertise cigarettes, weapons, authoritarian regimes. Surely you can do the same for these climate-busting products like SUVs.
We'll keep on keeping these things under review. Some of the policies that we have introduced at TfL have been far easier. For example, policies around foods high in fats, sugar and salt is made easier by the fact that the Department of Health, Food Safety Agency and others have guidance we can use in relation to what is a product that's a food high in fats, sugar and salt. Similarly, in relation to regimes that have policies to do with criminal law, to do with same-sex relationships, it's easy to check what those policies are in these emerging areas in relation to fossil fuel extraction. There are no clear guidance, and that's why TfL keeps these things under review for reasons that are clearly obvious.
Mr. Mayor, you're chair of the C40 cities. Cities like Sheffield, Edinburgh, The Hague are already banning adverts for fossil fuels. They're not even C40 cities. And if you think that this issue isn't urgent, you can just look at the TV screens outside in the London living room. We've been watching these devastating hurricanes barreling towards Florida, now made landfall overnight. Worst storm in a century. We've got meteorologists weeping, scientists, climate scientists saying, oh my goodness, these are outside all the predictions of what we were expecting in terms of the impact of warming oceans. We've seen, the worst storm in a century, and you're more concerned about the bottom lines of these companies that are advertising on TfL. You've had 5 years to review this. Will you commit to banning adverts for products like SUVs on the TfL network?
Well, it's important, Chair, to be accurate when it comes to assertions in questions. It's not the case that Edinburgh Council has banned these adverts. 2030 is when that ban comes into effect in Edinburgh. Amsterdam, by the way, still allows fossil fuel companies to advertise. That's the first point, so it's very important to get this accurate. The second point is in relation to her assertion, again, not a phrase I've mentioned, the bottom line, 0.020% of adverts last year were to do with fossil fuel companies. That's less than 1% over the last 5 years. The issue is one of clarity being required and the lack of certainty. We're going to carry on keep this thing under review. Once we have a system where we can make decisions that are clear, like we did with foods high in fat, sugar and salt, like we do with other issues, of course we try and move, but there isn't that certainty because of the lack of clarity there is on this issue.
Mr. Mayor, your advertising steering group could be having a look at this, and I'll leave it there.
Assembly Member Hall.
Morning, Mr. Mayor. You'll be aware of the very, very strict rules around food. In fact, you've been commenting on it just now. And so strong are these rules that Ed Gamble, a comedian, I'm sure you know, had to Photoshop out a hot dog and replace it with a cucumber on an advert for his show. Amazing. However, you've got a company called Waheed, who's a finance company, and featuring on those adverts is a chap called Mufti Menk, who actually is known to have denounced homosexuality as filthy and said that gays were worse than animals. So you'll stop a hot dog being put on there, but you're quite happy to have people like that featuring in those adverts.
Chair, I'm not aware of the advert. I'll look at it as soon as Mayor's question time is finished to see what's going on there. I'm more than happy to look into that and get back to the member.
Please do, because I think things like that just make the whole thing look totally ridiculous. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Assembly Member Hirani, please.
Thank you, Chair. And on the issue of advertising as well, so the Health Committee last year looked at the issue of gambling harms, and the mayoral advisor, Dr. Tom Coffey, did mention at that stage that while there were clear guidelines from government on junk food and high fats and high sugar in foods, there wasn't the same equivalent in problem gambling and that those definitions couldn't be translated into gambling harms. Can you now take forward with the new government to raise this issue and also see if similar work can happen where TfL can be then enabled to carry out a similar policy to junk food advertising on gambling harms?
Thanks for your question. More than happy to raise this with the government. It's just worth reminding ourselves of the challenges we face in relation to this, that the review's shown. We were celebrating this summer the huge success in the Olympics and the Paralympics. A lot of those athletes were funded by lottery funding. One of the excellent things the John Major government did was learn the lessons of Athens and realise that our athletes needed better funding. So John Major introduced the link between lottery funding and our Olympians. And so there are perverse consequences sometimes of these sorts of issues. So that's just an example of the challenge in relation to gambling and stuff. But I can reassure him that those are some of the issues we're looking into in the review. But I'm more than happy to ask the team to raise this with the government about the clarity they can provide for the reasons he's alluded to.
Thank you. The next question concerns cleaning up London's waterways, and it's in the name of Assembly Member Roberts.
Thanks for your question. The Thames and its tributaries are the lifeblood of London, shaping communities, sustaining livelihoods and bringing people closer to nature. Waterways and wetlands play host to wildlife, homes, transport and leisure. Whether you spend time on the water, travel alongside it or swim in it, our rivers should be for everyone. But for too long they've been neglected and damaged. 5 times more sewage flowed into London's rivers in 2023 compared to the previous year. Poor weather played a part in that, but this persistent pollution cannot continue. Many species are in decline despite efforts over the decades to restore them. Just as I've taken steps to clean London's air, I'm committed to cleaning London's water. This will take real ambition and collaboration, and I don't have the powers or resources to do this on my own. We've now started the work with partners to develop a plan to transform our rivers over the next 10 years, building thriving ecosystems and delivering waterways that are clean enough to swim in safely. I'm delighted that so many key stakeholders have joined me in this work, from WWF UK and the Zoological Society of London to Thames Water. They've all committed to cleaning our waterways and increasing London's biodiversity using a nature-first approach whenever possible. We'll develop a 10-year plan, but take quick wins along the way when we can. I was pleased to kick this process off at the Thames Tideway site on Victoria Embankment a few weeks ago with Steve Reed, Secretary of State for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs, and my Deputy Mayor, who share our ambitions on this. We've also launched our new London Open Water Swimming Guide to help Londoners find out where they can currently swim safely outdoors and where they might be able to in the future. We've already funded many projects to bring wildlife back to London's waterways, including successfully reintroducing beavers in Ealing and Enfield and planting reed beds along the old River Lee. Every Londoner, regardless of where they live or their background, should benefit from clean, safe and thriving waterways. Building on our progress as the world's first national park city, we want everyone who lives in our city to have the chance to experience the well-being benefits of spending time near water.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I agree with much of what you say in your answer. Would you agree, however, that it's something of a misstep for the Labour Secretary of State, Steve Reed, to give the green light for the next stage of exploration into the Teddington Direct River Abstraction Scheme, given that that will mean there's going to be 75 litres of treated effluent pumped into the Thames every single day as a result of that decision?
Thanks for your question and your keen interest, not just because as a member of the Assembly, but also as a council leader. My understanding is that the Teddington scheme would not involve any untreated wastewater being discharged into the Thames. But I've had concerns about this scheme, which is why I made representations to Thames Water, making clear that the scheme must meet environmental standards, both in terms of river ecology, but also human health as well. The good news is there's a consultation next year, again, for us to have another bite at the cherry. And you can rest assured I'll be responding to that consultation next year as well.
Thank you. That's very good news. Could I ask, would you ask the Deputy Mayor for Environment to meet with the campaigners who are opposed to this particular scheme, so that they may put their voice directly to you along with local councillors, so that we can have the best possible defence against Thames Water's plans in this particular area?
I'm more than happy to meet with him and the residents, and if I can't, the Deputy Mayor certainly will.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. The next question concerns the Metropolitan Police protection of women and girls, and it's in the name of Assembly Member McCartney.
Thanks for your question. Violence against women and girls is a national epidemic. I've overseen record investment of over £230 million since I became mayor to ensure we're tackling violence against women and girls in the round, funding work from supporting victims through to intervening with perpetrators. The Met Police Service has set out its commitment to tackling violence against women and girls as a priority, addressing issues raised by the Casey report in the New Met for London plan published last year. The Met Police Service has published a new VAUG action plan focused on tackling sexual offenders, improving women and girls' safety and rebuilding trust and confidence. The Met Police Service is also committed to allocating additional officers and staff to public protection roles and targeting perpetrators through the VAUG 100 approach. The new V100 approach is tackling the most harmful offenders by identifying the risk posed from the most dangerous perpetrators, regardless of whether there is a live investigation ongoing or not. The early results are promising, with 62 perpetrators convicted since becoming V100 targets and 62 additional suspects charged. The government's looking to scale up this approach across the country, demonstrating how London is leading the way on tackling violence against women and girls. Operation Soteria, the national operation to improve rape investigations, is another example of London leading the way. This programme was developed and led by City Hall and has now been adopted nationally by the Home Office. This approach is working in London. From April 2023 to March 2024, the Met Police Service charged 758 rape cases, up 255 compared with the previous year. But the scale of violence against women and girls is vast, and this is a national issue. Across the UK, there were 1 million VAUG offences recorded during 2022-2023, accounting for 20% of all police-recorded crime. Data shows that at least 1 in 12 women will become a victim of VAUG each year, and 1 in 20 people will be perpetrators. The Met Police Service have acknowledged there is more to do, and I'll continue to both support and challenge the Met Police Service to deliver against their aims. The new government has committed to halving violence against women and girls within the next decade. I look forward to working with them on this, and I remain unwavering in my commitment to tackle violence against women and girls.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. And it is good to see the new government having reducing violence against women and girls as one of their major priorities. I watched your London Policing Board from last month, and I noticed you went into this issue, and you are doing on a regular basis, which is really good. And the Commissioner said at the time that actually this is an enormous mountain that police forces have got to get to grips with. But looking at the recent HMI report, there are some things that really stood out there, and I'm really concerned about the victims and survivors in all of this. And one of the things that the HMI report noted was that the Met was relatively poor with regards to its use of preventative orders. For example, the Met has the lowest number of applications under the Domestic Violence Disclosure Scheme and child sexual offence disclosures, only a quarter of the UK average. Is that something that you're monitoring, and how are you going to make sure that the Met deliver on some things that might seem quite small in the big scale of the challenge, but actually make a vast difference to victims and survivors?
Well, can I thank you for a really important question. She should have seen the approach the Commissioner took, both talking about the progress made, but also being accepting of some of the issues that need to be addressed. The most recent HMI, she said, mentioned issues around service victims receive or lack thereof, and the way the police deals with offenders, and those have been addressed in the Met Police response to the HMI. She'll also note that actually the Met Police Service, compared to other parts of the country, is not doing enough in relation to preventative orders, which she's alluded to. That's one of the things that the Commissioner's addressing with his team. It was raised at the recent meeting with the HMI, our response to this issue. But also she can be rest assured that in between London Policing Board meetings, members are working with the Met Police to address these issues. Separately, there's a VAUG action plan which monitors these issues, and there's a VAUG board as well that looks at these issues. So in addition to her scrutiny and the scrutiny of the Police and Crime Committee, just to reassure her, there are other forums where this issue is raised as well. 1 in 12 women in this country this year will be the victim of violence against them.
Thank you. And of course that is reported crimes, and we know that reporting is quite low for these offences. One of the things that came out of your policing board was actually that there is now an ongoing programme of training, and that all officers will be receiving that. Because one of the criticisms was that quite often untrained officers were speaking to women and victims of domestic violence and were unable to pick up on things or really to delve closely as they should have done with appropriate language.
But one of the things I wanted to ask you is, this is not just a Met response, it's a whole system response. I know that you've given funding to community groups across London. So most recently, in your latest £3 million worth of funding, can I just say thank you for the funding to Enfield Sahaley and Sister System in my constituency. And I visited them recently and saw the excellent work that they're doing. But one of the things that really struck me from the police's own data was regards to the harmful content from online influencers that are particularly pernicious and particularly having an influence on young people today. So I believe that in 2022 to 23, the most common age of online tech-enabled violence against women and girls was 10 to 15 years. So that's a generation coming through. And I'm just wondering what more you can do, or what more the government can do to make sure that we can do all we can to make sure that we don't have a generation of young boys and men who are influenced inappropriately by these online harms.
The issue that you raise is, I think, a huge issue for society generally, about the influence of unchecked social media, the way the algorithms work, and the impact on young people, and a whole host of issues. We saw riots taking place this summer because of misinformation, disinformation and lies. One of my concerns about young boys in particular, looking at some of this on TikTok and so forth, is the way the algorithms work is, if the first video you look at is, for example, Andrew Tate, the algorithms work in a way that the subsequent feeds you have are from similar type characters. And so that is a problem for us in relation to the attitudes our boys have growing up using a mobile phone, which is essentially, a laptop, a really powerful device. And so we're talking to the Department for Education. We're working with schools across London to make sure we can, at an early age, teach boys and girls resilience, stoicism, how to respond, better education, being literate on these issues, but warning of the risks. Also working with the social media companies about when people do searches, make sure other things come up in relation to what they may originally be looking for, so they can be signposted to better education as well. It is a big source of concern, I know, for the government, for us, for the police and for others as well.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. The next question is concerns safety in London, and it's in the name of Assembly Member Wilson.
Thank you for your question. So Jim Ratcliffe clearly had concerns about personal safety and the safety of others. That's one of the reasons tackling violence is my top priority, and I'm committed to building a safer London for everyone by being tough on violence and tough on its complex causes. I've stepped in to fund the Met Police Service, filling massive gaps left by cuts and poor investment from the previous government over the last decade. We'll be investing a record £1.148 billion in the Met Police Service this year from City Hall. That's more than double the amount invested by my predecessor as Mayor. That pays, for example, for more police and more preventative services. We're also invested in an additional £6.5 million to support the Violence Reduction Unit to boost community-led projects like the provision of street-based youth workers, diverting young Londoners from crime and violence. Since I became Mayor in 2016, despite government austerity and our population rising by more than 1 million, knife crime with injury among victims aged 25 and under is down 24%, gun crime is down 5%, lethal barrel discharges are down 40%, homicides down 7%, and burglaries down 21%. The latest ONS figures show that London's violent crime rate is lower than the rest of England and Wales. In the year to March 24, there were 28.4 violent crimes per 1,000 people in London, compared to 33 per 1,000 in the rest of England and Wales, and 46.8 per 1,000 in similar police forces like Greater Manchester, West Yorkshire and the West Midlands. I understand and share people's concerns about theft and robbery. As part of our commitment to tackling these issues, we launched a new robbery reduction partnership earlier this year to reduce robbery and improve joint working between agencies including the Met Police Service, London Councils, the CPS, the Youth Offending Service, TfL, the Safer Business Network, the Violence Reduction Unit and the British Transport Police. In addition, MOPAC and the MPS continue to work with businesses to make London a safer place to work and do business, supporting the work of business crime reduction partnerships and the wider business community. I remain committed to being both tough on crime and tough on its complex causes by investing and collaborating with partners to make London a safer city for everyone.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for that comprehensive response. Lots of things to look into there, and I was originally intending to use this opportunity to do that, but I think there will be other opportunities in due course, I'm sure. I think as we're talking about public safety and perceptions of public safety, I simply have to turn my attention to some of the scenes that we saw over the weekend. And shocking, but not necessarily that surprising. On the eve of the anniversary of October the 7th, it had a long kind of list of examples of very worrying things, whether photographed on placards or whether recorded as chants. Things like "Long live the Intifada," "Go home and count your money," "Internal Zionists now," "I love Hezbollah," "Hamas are not terrorists," "We don't want no two-state, we want 1948," "Zionism is racism," "Yemen make us proud," "Zionism shut it down," "I just effing love October," "Long live resistance." All these things, and of course the old favourite, "From the river to the sea," all these things seen, photographed, recorded at events over the weekend with no immediate police response to any of them at the time. On Monday, the Campaign Against Anti-Semitism posted that we are now at a point where anti-Israel demonstrators apparently feel free enough to yell support for prescribed terrorist organisations. What would have once been unthinkable has now become normalised. So we've seen this climate being allowed to fester for months. We've seen a fourfold increase in reported anti-Semitic hate crime. So is it any wonder that polls are showing 3/4 of British Jews now feel less safe than they did prior to last October, 50% have less confidence in the police, and amongst the wider public, 59% are deterred from coming into London on protest days?
For those watching this and reading this, a lot of the things that you read out are criminal offences. It's worth people recognising their criminal offences in case they try and repeat those for obvious reasons. So there has been a huge increase, an unacceptable increase in anti-Semitism over the last 12 and a half months. We know from past tensions in the Middle East that often leads to an increase in anti-Semitism, not just in London, not just in the UK, but across the Western world. That's unacceptable. That's one of the reasons why we spend a lot of time, effort and energy teaching our youngsters about what it means to be a proper Londoner, not believing the stereotypes, the racism, the anti-Semitism that some of these tropes are talking about. At the same time, the police service has worked incredibly hard, not just in relation to arrests this weekend, arrests since this weekend, but over the last 12 months since the horrors and tragedy of October the 7th, to reassure our Jewish communities that the police are there to keep them safe. It is a fact, though, you're right. Londoners who are Jewish are feeling scared, sometimes for good reason. There is a heightened fear for many Londoners who are Jewish to go into the centre of our city on days when there are protests. And those of us that aren't Jewish need to understand that and show allyship, empathy, solidarity, but also to call out some of the things you've called out this morning, and I commend you for calling them out. The police have been quite clear in relation to taking a zero tolerance towards crimes being committed, but also hatred in our city, and they're the full support of not just myself and the government, but also clearly members of the Assembly as well. I will make sure I feed into the Commissioner your comments this morning to make sure any of the comments you've said that aren't being investigated are just followed up as well.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I appreciate that. All I'm asking for is consistency. Please, can we have a situation where the disorder over the summer that was dealt with swiftly by the police and justice system is swiftly, decisively and nipped in the bud? That needs to apply to this too. We've had 12 months where that hasn't been happening, or certainly hasn't been perceived to be happening. Please, can we have that level of consistency?
Can I just say, for the want of I reject completely the assertion that the police operate on a two-tier policing model. They don't. The police without fear or favour. I support the police in their response over the summer, and I support the police in their response this weekend. But he's right. There are some offences that have been committed that need to be followed up if they've not already been done so, and I'll make sure the police follow those up.
I thank you. Assembly Member Wilson is now out of time. The next question concerns London Challenge Poverty Week. In the name of Assembly Member Ahmed, but Assembly Member Clark will be asking the question.
Thanks for asking the question in Assembly Member Ahmed's absence. The Household Support Fund has helped boroughs to provide crucial support to people who would otherwise be facing destitution and severe hardship as a result of the pandemic and then the increase in the cost of living. This is including support with energy bills, emergency food support and investment in crisis funds and local advice services. I'm pleased the new government has confirmed an extension of the Household Support Fund up to March 2025. Looking ahead, it's clear boroughs do need long-term certainty about their role in supporting people in crisis and the resources to meet this and broad obligations. I stand ready to work in partnership with boroughs alongside a government that recognises the vital role of local leaders in helping to shape this. London Challenge Poverty Week is an important time to focus on how we can work together to address poverty in London. I want to thank the officers at 4 in 10 and all the member organisations putting on events this week for their continued commitment to improving the lives of Londoners. For my part, I'm determined to do all we can to support Londoners in poverty, especially at a time when so many are still struggling with the cost of living. I'm proud we've taken bold action from City Hall, including providing free school meals for all state primary school children, providing more than 15.3 million free meals during school holidays and at weekends. On top of that, investing £4 billion into building genuinely affordable homes, freezing TfL fares, and funding advice and income maximisation interventions that have helped put nearly £35 million in extra income back into the pockets of Londoners on low incomes. The new government has made a series of commitments that will help boost Londoners' living standards and build financial resilience at the household level, including the child poverty strategy, reforms on social security and employment support, and the National Growth Mission. I'm committed to working closely with the government across these policies and identifying the part London can play in breaking down barriers to opportunity and improving local communities. Together, we'll deliver much-needed change and improve living standards for all Londoners.
Thank you for your answer, and good morning, Mr. Mayor. I was delighted, as I'm sure you were, to see yesterday the new government already taking action on and strengthening renters' rights, which is something I know you've been calling for in this chamber. What conversations have you been having? Because obviously, paying rent and having rights as a renter, there's a direct correlation between rental agreements falling through and families being evicted and poverty. What conversations have you had around that with government ahead of that announcement?
Well, we've had lots of conversations with the government when it was in opposition, and also since they won the election on July the 4th, about strengthening the previous Renters Reform Bill. It's now a Renters' Rights Bill, really important. And the Secretary of State yesterday, the Prime Minister, set out the changes she'd made from the previous incarnation of the bill. If the member remembers, Conservative MPs stopped that bill passing through before the general election. The Prime Minister has published a strengthened bill yesterday because renters have very few rights. You'll be aware of the consequences of Section 21, no-fault eviction. The fact that if a tenant complains about damp and mould, a landlord can simply serve them a notice to quit the property. A tenant raising issues in relation to rent going up can be evicted without any reason. And so that will improve the security of tenants, which has a knock-on saving to councils, housing associations and society generally, because hopefully it will lead to less homelessness, less rough sleeping, and less of the problems we've seen over the last few decades. This problem didn't begin, to be clear, in 2010. This is a problem decades in the making, a deregulation of the private rental market, not enough affordable homes being built and so forth. And I think yesterday was another first step to try and fix this crisis.
I just wanted to thank you for joining, for coming to the visit to Little Village in Camden yesterday, where we saw firsthand the difference that volunteers make, and we saw firsthand the difference that amount of money coming from City Hall is going to support their work to go even further, and that's replicated across London in my constituency. I also have a similar organisation called Sebby's Cornet and Barnet, which is also doing excellent work. I know if Marina Ahmed was here today, she would very much want to put on note her support for thanking the staff at the 4 in 10 for coordinating the London Challenge Poverty Week. And I just wanted to ask if you join me and Marina in thanking all those who work and volunteer in this important area.
Absolutely. We met some of them yesterday, didn't we? The amazing work volunteers do in their spare time. One of the things that should worry all of us is when you look at children in poverty, 3/4 of those children are in households where their parents work. So this is in-work poverty. Parents have a job, they're working incredibly hard for them, 2 jobs, then living in poverty. And so, the volunteers are crucial in supporting these families, providing the additional safety net they need, particularly with the challenges there are in welfare benefits. So I'm afraid it's going to be a tough winter in relation to climate, temperatures, impact on bills, impact on clothing, impact on heating and so forth. So, volunteers have begun the work, but this autumn and winter they'll be working even harder, so they've my full support, gratitude, and we'll be meeting some of them over the course of the next few weeks and months, I'm sure.
Thank you, Chair.
Assembly Member Garrett, please.
Morning. So, something that will put even more financial pressure on Londoners who are struggling is the inability of TfL to process refunds, to issue receipts for journeys because of the cyber attack that's still ongoing. I think Do you have a sense of the scale of the problem of those unpaid refunds? Do you know when the problem will be resolved? And I suppose, most importantly, can you guarantee that in the end all of those people will get their refund?
Thanks for raising this issue. I had a briefing on this week, actually. Some of the figures I can't share publicly, but I'm happy for the moment to be briefed offline. So the figure's big in relation to the numbers of people who've paid a fare but shouldn't have paid a fare, if that makes sense. So TfL, when it comes to return to normal business, are prioritising those passengers first. He'll also be aware of the issue about zip cards and other issues and stuff. So the way TfL are working is to make sure those commuters who are out of pocket can be resolved first. So it's triage, and then as things improve, those who aren't out of pocket but using expired zip cards will be sorted out and stuff as well. The mission's begun now, so that work's begun. There is a figure which was shared with me, but I'm nervous sharing it publicly, but I'm more than happy for that to be shared with the member privately.
But in the end, everyone, when it's all resolved, will get their money back.
That's what TfL want to do, yeah.
OK, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. The next question has been withdrawn, and before we go on to the next question, which is in the name of Assembly Member Clark again, apparently when I welcomed the Ukrainian refugees here earlier, they weren't actually in the room. That's probably down to the Jubilee line, so sorry about that.
Actually, I think you should say in Ukrainian again, I think.
OK, Dobroho ranku, and Laskavo prosimo. So thank you very much for coming here today.
Chair, I think you got 3 out of 10 for that.
Yeah, come for goodness sake. 7 words in Ukrainian doesn't go very far. The next question is concerns flood mitigation and response in London, and it's in the name of Assembly Member Clark.
Chair, sorry, my Conservative clock is ticking down on my screen. It probably shouldn't be. Somebody's just sorted that out. Sure. No, it's into your time. Thank you, Chair. The London Fire Brigade serves and protects Londoners every day. I commend the work of the firefighters, control officers and support staff who work tirelessly to serve and protect this great city. As a result of climate change, extreme weather events in the capital have become more frequent. This has increased the scale, severity and duration of incidents related to flooding. The London Fire Brigade, the LFB, is adapting its response to meet this change in risk. Its Community Risk Management Plan sets out what it will do to help reduce, prepare for and respond to extreme flooding risk in London. I'll continue to support the LFB as it delivers that plan and make sustained improvements. The LFB works closely with the Met Office and other partners across London so that when an extreme weather warning is forecasted, it can allocate resources and communicate safety advice to Londoners. Using investment from City Hall, the LFB has introduced new equipment to deal with extreme flooding. Frontline appliances can now request up to 500 metres of flood protection barriers stored at 2 strategic locations in London. Crews can also utilise 10 water-trained fire rescue units, each carrying an inflatable rescue boat for operations on water. New ejector pumps enable crews to safely pump water out from confined spaces, as do water removal resource packs. The LFB plays a key role in national resilience and can deploy assets including flood rescue boats, high-volume pumps and supporting tactical advisors. In turn, they receive support from other fire and rescue services as part of the National Resilience Framework. While English Fire and Rescue Services have the power to respond to flooding, there is no statutory duty for them to do so. The LFB should have the statutory duty and funding to respond to flooding, to formalise and support the work they're already doing in relation to flooding. We've continued to fund the LFB from City Hall beyond what the previous government said we should provide to ensure it has the resources it needs to keep Londoners safe. As a result, the LFB can invest in operational training this year to address changing risks, including new firefighting equipment and training and support for firefighters.
Thank you for that. So Thames Water plays a critical role in managing the infrastructure of London, such as drainage and sewers, and is frequently criticised for managing it poorly. I could cite examples all day long. But how does your vision for flood management support collaboration between the LFB and Thames Water to address these weaknesses?
So Thames Water are clearly a crucial partner in relation to these issues for a number of reasons. In addition to bad weather causing flooding, burst water pipes because of neglect from Thames Water can cause flooding. So LFB has a good relationship with Thames Water. There is a memorandum of understanding with Thames Water in relation to contaminated runoff, for example. They're both active members of the London Resilience Forum. and they're both also part of the Service Water Strategic Group that we set up a few years ago as a result of flash flooding. And I think if the Fire Commissioner was here, he would say he has got a relationship where he can pick up the phone and speak to the relevant person at Thames Water, and vice versa, which wasn't the case in years gone by.
Thank you for that. So things directly in your control. When we're talking about new housing developments, what measures are you putting in place to ensure that flood prevention measures are included in new housing developments?
It's a really important issue in relation to our London plan and the strategic guidance we have in place. And it's one of the issues raised during the London Climate Resilience Review was not just the new homes, but the existing homes that are in areas that are prone to flooding. So since 2009, I think we can have more confidence in relation to homes and flooding because planning policy changed. And so we're more confident in relation to newer homes. The London plans, local plans, national policy framework is quite clear. I'm afraid there are some older homes, basement flats, stations and so forth, which are less resilient to flooding. Member will be aware the flash flooding a couple of summers ago, many of our stations, DLR and underground, were closed, and overground actually. Many workplaces and homes were flooded as well. We now have a sort of heat map of London, or a water map of London, where we know these issues are. So in advance of bad weather, we let them know there's bad weather coming, but also advise them in advance things they can do, have insurance, have a bag ready, and so forth, so forth.
Thank you for that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. The next question concerns Public Order Policing report, and it's in the name of Assembly Member Hall, please.
Thank you for your question. I want to firstly acknowledge just how operationally challenging the past 12 months has been in terms of public order policing for the Metropolitan Police Service due to environmental protests and the ongoing conflict in the Middle East and related protest activity. This is a complex political situation, and I'm totally confident that the Met Police Service continues to police London without fear or favour. London is being served by a professional police service, adapting its operational tactics as and when required, and the Met Police Service should be commended for the approach it has taken over the past year. I've always made it clear that the right to protest is a cornerstone of our democracy, but it must always be peaceful, lawful and safe. The Met Police Service must balance the rights of protesters against the need to protect the public. We have zero tolerance for acts of violence or hate in London. The impact of the previous government's approach to this sensitive issue and its persistent underfunding of the Met Police Service did not help the pressures that the Met Police Service faces. Not only did they refuse to make up the Met Police Service's annual funding shortfall for its unique national policing responsibilities, but the former Home Secretary made unfounded and inflammatory comments that actively made policing in London more difficult. This new government understands the issues, and I'll work with them to support the Met Police Service to effectively police London and keep Londoners safe. As the past 12 months have demonstrated, there's a need to review public order policing and to find sustainable solutions to address the demands placed on the police. MOPAC is now considering the recommendations from the HMI-CFRS inspection into activism and impartiality in policing that was published on the 10th of September, and the implications of this for the Met Police Service. We're focusing on the HMI-CFRS recommendations as the formal inspection body for the police service. Views from other bodies are sometimes considered alongside this. I also welcome the new Home Secretary's announcement on the 2nd of September that she's commissioned HMI-CFRS to conduct a rapid review of elements of the policing response to the recent summer disorder. The policing of protests is the operational responsibility of the Met Police Service, and the Commissioner and his team know they have my full support. MOPAC will continue to support and oversee the Met Police Service as they police protests across the capital.
Mr. Mayor, you're nothing if not predictable. I just knew that somehow you'd be blaming the previous government. You're still blaming the previous mayor, and he's been gone 8 years. But within this extremely good report, and I suspect you haven't read it. If you haven't, please do, but it's a very, very good report. It actually highlights the watering down of scrutiny of the police force and, of course, MOPAC. It actually puts that in there around page 100, etc. And since the formation of the policing board, you'll know, because you chose all the members that sit on that, the Police and Crime Committee has not had senior police officers. And now we find that on the 23rd of this month, we have no senior police officers coming to answer our questions. And of course, we won't have a deputy mayor to come and answer the questions. Now, I've written to you to ask you if you will come on the 23rd, as you're the Police and Crime Commissioner. Will you come and answer our questions on the 23rd?
Chair, I'm not aware of my diary for the 23rd, but I'll make sure my office responds to the member in due course.
Yeah, we won't take bets on whether you'll be there or not. But perhaps you can answer something that I've been asked to ask since it's very, very current. Sky News reported that, and I'm quoting, London Mayor Sadiq Khan spoke to the Metropolitan Police to encourage them to give the megastar a VIP escort through London. So you've since said you haven't. Can you categorically state that the Sky News report is wrong and that you had absolutely no role in either arranging the escort or lobbying the Met for a different decision on it?
I can categorically confirm that operational matters are matters for the police, not matters for the mayor. And I've never interfered in operational matters as far as the police are concerned. What I can confirm is I regularly speak to the Commissioner and his senior team about matters of safety in London, whether it's concerts, whether it's sporting events, whether it's Carnival, whether it's New Year's Eve fireworks, whether it's the King's coronation. I'll be speaking to the Commissioner today about events this weekend that I'll be attending. And that's a regular occurrence, me being the mayor of this great city.
So you're saying that all these media outlets are absolutely wrong. You had absolutely nothing whatsoever to do with the fact that Taylor Swift was given special treatment by the police?
If the member is suggesting that the police give preferential treatment, then that's a question she should raise with the Commissioner. The Commissioner would, I'm sure, respond by saying he pleases, and I support him in this, without fear or favour. I'm unaware of the Commissioner's musical tastes.
Okay, well, no doubt Sky, etc., will find out where they got that information from, and we'll hear more about that. But in the meantime, can you please ensure that somebody comes to the cross-party Police and Crime Committee to answer questions on policing? Because, as you know, things are not going very well with policing in London, and we have got very, very pertinent questions that need answering. Thank you.
Chair, I'll make sure my office responds to the member in due course, yeah.
Thank you. Assembly Member Bailey, please.
Morning, Mayor. I want to return to the subject of police cadets. I received a letter from a parent. I believe you received the same letter, where she speaks at great length and with great power about her daughter Olivia and the positive effect that the formal arrangement of cadets had on her, not only on her but the wider community, etc., etc. We then went to speak. She then speaks about things about the impact on the community. I want to add to that how it helps with recruitment, how the police have a real problem with young people, and this is one of the ways in. You very helpfully, last time we had this conversation, talked about a budget amendment, which I will be coming forward with, in the appropriate time, etc. What I really want from you today is to get a commitment to talk to MOPAC to act now, because our budget process is what it is. It's in the future. It will take some time. But if this closing of cadet units isn't spoken about very quickly with the police, it may become irreversible. So I'm trying to get a commitment.
Assembly Member, could you at least connect it to public order, please?
I'm getting there.
Thank you.
I'm getting there, because you know that young people are very concerned about public order.
That was good. That was very good, Chair.
Yeah.
So, firstly, can I say thank you for raising this issue this time and last time, and the way you've raised it. Can I explain why the Commissioner's recommended doing this? Because it's really important colleagues understand. So, for those that aren't aware, the member is aware that the current age to be a police cadet is from 8 to 18. A lot of police officer time is spent on safeguarding issues because obviously they're very young children. The Commissioner makes the point, which I can't disagree with. He's got limited number of officers. Rather than them supervising young police cadets, he'd rather they be keeping our public safe around public disorder and other issues. So he wants to limit the age group to 13 to 17, who require less supervision and not necessarily police officer supervision. But for those who are 18, they can join the police service. You mentioned the pathway. For those younger than 13, the police cadet route may not be the route for a uniformed youth service for the reasons of finite resources. If it was the case that the Commissioner had additional resources, he would not prioritise this area. And it's an operational matter for him to advise me on about how he rations his limited resources. And so I want to be clear with him. I don't want to raise expectations about this issue. And so his advice is in this year, 24-25, he's got to make these changes. The operational matters, and I don't feel qualified to question the Commissioner when he's saying I've got to have these police officers there where they're needed rather than doing the police cadet work. So I think he makes a good point, which I agree with.
Notwithstanding what you've just said, and thank you for your answer and your candor, the Commissioner may be right to some extent, but to be very clear, what I'm asking for is an intervention from MOPAC with the Commissioner to understand how we can, A, get some more funds out of you to keep the cadets safe and going in the future. The thing about age group, the young police cadets, I do see there is a challenge there. But if we can arrange enough of a bump up from your funds, they may be able to mitigate that as well. But I'm worried on two levels. One, the cadets disappearing altogether, and two, the junior police cadets as well. I accept that it is complicated, and the Commissioner has, for want of a better term, more pressing issues, but we, with the intervention of you, can do something very significant for young people in London.
Chair, thanks for the question. There's two things. One is we won't get involved in 24-25 in year. But second, the Commissioner makes another point, which is in percentage terms, the number of cadets he has versus police officers is huge compared to other forces. Other forces, it's circa 4%. Ours is much bigger than that. So his aim in any event is to get the police cadets numbers down to a more manageable number, in percentage terms, 3-4%. So that's the other issue in relation to us getting involved in this issue. I'm more than happy to send the comments from the member to both MOPAC and the Met Police Service to understand where he's coming from. But I'm afraid it looks like the direction of travel is that for there to be fewer police cadets, and for those police cadets there are, to be the age cohort 13 to 17.
Could you then ask for them to write to me with the information that they're given to you, so I can scrutinise it in that way? But I just want to say, we all know the police cadets are serious, and we need to impress upon the Met this might be the way of helping them with a very serious recruiting problem.
Thank you, Assembly Member. I'm getting a little concerned that we're drifting off subject quite substantially here. It should be relevant to the what's on the order paper. So
consider my wrists slapped,
yes,
Chair.
Thank you. Assembly Member Roberts, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Dragging ourselves back to the agenda. Yesterday we heard from Lord Walney and his report. Recommendation 20 of the Walney report suggests that the government should consider the viability of requiring protest organisers to contribute to policing costs when groups are holding a significant number of large demonstrations which cause serious disruption or significant levels of law breaking. Would you support that recommendation?
I've not seen John Woodcock's report. I'm responding to your question. No, I wouldn't. Can you imagine those protesting in the 30th century on the Peasants' Revolt, or the poll tax protest, saying, by the way, yes, you can protest about the poll tax, but you've got to pay a poll tax to protest about the poll tax. I mean, what's next? Paying people to write to their mayor, or writing to their MP, or signing a petition, or going to their surgery. Look, protest is the cornerstone of a democracy. It's a balanced exercise, and I don't want to go back to Magna Carta or common law or the Public Order Act or, God forbid, the European Convention, but you can guess where I stand on this issue.
Assembly Member Desai, please.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, all the marches that we've seen over the last few months or the last year, the police response does require a debate. There are issues raised. It's how we do the debate that is important. What answers do we provide? It's important that the debate is done in a reasonable, rational, and responsible manner, particularly by those people in positions of power or the ability to influence the debate. It's about providing answers that are workable. And this is where my problem is with the policy exchange report, because this report puts forward a series of completely unworkable recommendations that would put the Met in an impossible position. At a time when the police are understaffed and overworked, prisons are overcrowded, giving the Met more responsibilities to adjudicate when protests are or are not allowed, and therefore giving them the duty to crack down on protests that do not meet the criteria of, say, 1 month's notice. This would only serve to strain the Met's relationship with Londoners and increase pressure on the service. The Met has represented itself well in avoiding major violence during the Southport riots and the Gaza marches. Do you agree that the last thing that the police needs is yet more politicians, more politicians attempting to micromanage how the Met polices public order events in order to score political points?
I think it's really important to reflect on what the member has said. The police have such a difficult job that they're damned if they do and they're damned if they don't. And if they're sort of moved pillar to post, almost like a pinball in a pinball machine, nobody benefits from that being done. Look, the police can't get involved in the merits or demerits of the substantive issue. All they can do is enforce the law. And you'll be aware that the law was strengthened last year because of the government not being happy with environmental protest. And so the police can now attach additional conditions to protest, but also can take steps in advance of a protest around stop and search, additional powers and the machinery to glue and so forth. And so, you know, I think the issue is not giving them more powers, but clarity around those powers, which is a source of tension and confusion for police officers around protest, around obstruction, around public nuisance laws. And I think we shouldn't politicise the police or get them involved in party politics. And language does matter. And this summer, you know, you've seen the Commission trying to bring the tone down of everyone, just trying to calm things down, because the police will police whether it's a Black Lives Matter protest, whether it's a protest to do with events in the Middle East, the same way, without fear or favour.
Thank you, Mr. And on the question of sort of language, perhaps I should bring this to the attention of the Assembly. I was there when the Commissioner gave his lecture to at the Police Foundation, and this is what he had to say about language, and I quote, "We should be very clear. When people, be they politicians or the public, through accusations and slurs at the police, they put them in danger by emboldening thugs,
The Commissioner may have been referring to a real-life example where one of his officers received threats, abuse, and so forth because of disinformation, misinformation by people who should know better. And so the Commissioner's got personal experience of officers being affected by this. Somebody else has talked about the concerns around recruitment challenges. There are also concerns around retention challenges because of some of these issues. And the Commissioner's just raising issues that are brought to his attention on a regular basis by officers.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. The next question concerns World Mental Health Day in the name of Assembly Member Harani.
Thanks for raising this really important issue. Years of neglect under the previous government have left young people's mental health in crisis. Waiting lists are at record highs and many young people have been unable to get the help they need. We've been working from City Hall to do what we can to support good mental health for all Londoners. In the past 8 years, we've invested over £4 million in mental health programmes, supporting hundreds of thousands of Londoners to champion mental health in their communities. We've delivered initiatives to help Londoners back into work and education, foster community cohesion, and connect 100,000 young Londoners with mentors, all of which promote positive well-being. My Violence Reduction Unit intervenes at key points in a young person's life, and between the VRU and our other programmes, we've provided more than 500,000 positive opportunities to help young people fulfil their potential. And in this mayoral term, we'll work to provide a further 250,000 positive opportunities for young people, helping young Londoners thrive. Over 2,300 schools are registered to My Healthy Schools London Award programme, which encourages schools to take practical steps to improve the mental health and well-being of young people. Collaboration is essential to tackling mental health in London. That's why I'll continue funding Thrive London to work with the NHS, mental health providers and Good Thinking to pull together expertise, resources and best practice. The theme of this year's World Mental Health Day is workplace health. My Good Work Standard sets the benchmark for good employment practices in London, and through it, employers are encouraged to support staff well-being, work-life balance and cost of living challenges. Every Londoner deserves to live in a city that supports their well-being, and I'll remain focused on supporting Londoners' mental health this World Mental Health Day and throughout the year.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just in your manifesto, you mentioned and referred to mental health and the impact of the pandemic, social media and the cost of living crisis, all contributing to greater levels of poor mental health, and described the current situation as a public health emergency. You also committed to piloting initiatives focused in and around secondary schools, and then working with a prospective Labour government to use the learnings from these pilots to deliver mental health hubs for young people across our city. How are you currently working to develop those pilots?
Thank you for your question. I reflect on my own experience in secondary school. We had on-site all the time a nurse matron available for us to go and see. Many schools now don't have that, particularly secondary schools, and we know the mental health crisis that exists amongst young people. So if you park for a second the delays in getting CAM services, the referral time and so forth. Actually, many of the challenges young people have don't need to be medicalised. You need somebody to talk to who can then triage, signpost and so forth. So we are working with experts, looking at existing data, looking at academic studies, talking to the government about how soon we can set up mental health pilots in secondary schools to support young people before something becomes a crisis. Actually, social media can be a source of good here because you can signpost to social media. That's quite helpful and quite useful. And there's good mental health apps available. So the pilot will be the design for the pilot will be forthcoming. And what we also want to do is evaluate the pilot, so we can then use that as a lobbying tool to exercise the government, if it works, to roll this out across the city and across the country.
Thank you, and good to hear that that manifesto commitment is already moving forward. Now, back to today's theme of World Mental Health Day around mental health in the workplace. You've already mentioned the work that the GLA is doing, but how can we best share that best practice?
Well, firstly, we must never be complacent. I don't pretend the GLA is perfect in relation to this issue. But there are things we can share what we are doing, as well as improving our own game. We have the Good Work Standard. 145 employees have signed up to that. That means to the tune of 250,000 Londoners are now benefiting through their employees through the Good Work Standard. A lot of that has practice in relation to good mental health, well-being, first aid, mental health first aid, and so forth. Good thinking, resources and toolkit we're rolling out to places of work. We're speaking to the TfL about what more they can do with their staff. They employ circa 34,000 people directly. 28,000 people, who bus operating companies and so forth. The London Fire Brigade is got to be a responsible employer. The Met Police Service as well. So we're talking to the functional bodies about what more we can do, both in terms of mental health, mental ill health, and prevention and resilience, which is really important as well, and providing a space where people can talk about it, either confidentially or in a more public forum.
Thank you. And you mentioned child and adolescent mental health services as well, alluded to the waiting list that we have around CAMHS services. Now, I've been speaking to local authority representatives across both of the boroughs that I represent, both elected members as well as council staff and officials. And two major areas of budget concern are around children's mental health, but also around temporary accommodation. And the two are interlinked, as they explicitly said to me. If you are struggling to keep a roof over your head, families are struggling to stay in London as the impact of mortgage deals running out is hitting Londoners. People are facing eviction, sadly, and that does mean that they have to be uprooted from where they are in many cases, and has a knock-on impact on children's mental health as well. How crucial and how important is it that we get our housing response and support to Londoners, working with local authorities and government right, so that we can support as many families as possible in London?
I mean, you speak to your two councils on a regular basis. I speak to our councils, and they tell me one of the reasons why many are on the brink of bankruptcy is their temporary accommodation bill and their children's services bill. Park for a second, social care, which is another issue that they face, and that's been exacerbated in the recent past. We're doing what we can to support councils during this difficult time. We're hoping there's some respite in the budget this October for councils. Really important for their budgets to be balanced and so forth. One of the things we are trying to do is to provide support to those families by maximising the benefits they're entitled to. They're not receiving, as I said in a previous question. I mean, money issues is the source of a lot of these challenges that families face, which lead to knock-on issues in relation to moving and so forth. So it is a big issue. The Renters' Rights Bill published yesterday can't be passed soon enough to try and stop the pace of the evictions there are, which is a big challenge in London.
Thank you. I think it's about time for a 10-minute comfort break, so we'll adjourn for 10 minutes. Thank you. One of the courses I will be recommending to Rebecca to run is the mental calculation of 10 minutes on to 11:31. It will be for Assembly members. The Mayor was here. The next question is in the name of Assembly Member Georgiou, and it concerns donations whilst representing London.
Thanks for your question. It's really important as elected representatives that we all share a commitment to transparency and the highest standards of ethics in public life. In that spirit, I'm confident that I'm the most transparent mayor ever. Despite the government at the time not doing so, we put transparency at the heart of everything we do, and our commitment goes well beyond the mandatory local government transparency code. We publish interests, gifts, hospitality and expenses for me, the mayoral advisors and senior Greater London Authority officers. We publish details of senior officer responsibilities, salary data and a GLA organogram. We publish hundreds of data sets on the London Data Store, which averages over 125,000 users per month, helping Londoners understand their city and develop solutions to London's challenges. We publish gender and ethnicity pay audit data and action plans. We've signed up to the Codes of Practice for Statistics, becoming the first organisation to do this voluntarily. We've pre-announced publication dates for our statistics for enhanced transparency. We're rigorous about both statutory and non-statutory consultations. All our statutory strategies were consulted on widely for between 12 and 14 weeks, including public engagement through Talk London, representative polls, surveys of Londoners, focus groups, interviews and stakeholder and community engagement meetings. We published my diary proactively, unlike any previous mayor. On gifts and hospitality specifically, everything I receive is declared and published online in the appropriate way, governed by the same strict rules that apply to all members of the authority. This is the same process followed by my predecessors, Boris Johnson and Ken Livingstone. A new ministerial code is published after every general election, and I welcome that the Prime Minister has commissioned a new set of principles on gifts and hospitality to be published as part of the updated code. One thing I know the government will be looking at is the situation under the last government, in which opposition MPs and all non-ministers had to declare details on the MP register, including value, while ministers did not in the equivalent ministerial process. As well as providing clear advice for ministers on what's expected of them, the new ministerial code will close this declaration loophole for ministers, because this government is committed to being more upfront and open than its predecessors.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. And I think, yes, still good morning. At no point in my written question to you in which you've responded to did I accuse you of not being transparent. In fact, because you've been transparent, I can jog your memory on some of the many gifts that you've accepted, which includes £1,100 in suits from Hugo Boss, another £1,200 from Giorgio Armani, £2,000 for Swarovski for a crystal portrait. I'd be interested to know what you put in the portrait. A signed guitar from Buddy Guy, Converse trainers, a porcelain bear, and even a bit of Lego. Now, do you think that when you accepted these gifts during the cost of living crisis, COVID, and now that we are going through the removal of the winter fuel allowance from London's pensioners, that it was appropriate to accept these gifts?
So there are many gifts that I've received over the last 8 years. I can't recall all of them. They're all declared for obvious reasons, and they all follow the rules. I'd remind the member, because it's important that he's reminded, that this was the practice under both the previous mayor and the one before him as well.
As you're keen of reminding us, Mr. Mayor, you have been the Mayor of London over the last 8 years, and you are still the Mayor of London for the next 4 years. So I'll repeat my question. You, as a man, and it's declared how much you earn, should be receiving expensive suits from Hugo Boss, Giorgio Armani, a lovely crystal portrait from Swarovski, and other gifts during challenging times for Londoners.
Well, Chair, the reason why the member knows about all gifts and other issues is because I declare them all. And it's worth reminding the member this is the same practice under both the previous mayors, and it follows the rules. I've always made sure that we are transparent, not just in terms of the gifts that I receive and donations in kind, but also others as well. I'll be this weekend in my capacity as a mayor visiting a sporting event and another event and declaring those as well. It's important there's transparency, so there's no concern about undue influence or impropriety.
Mr. Mayor, once again, I'm not disagreeing with your transparency with regard to your declarations.
And I concede you're a very snazzy dresser, and I applaud you on that. But now we know why. It's thanks to Hugo Boss and Giorgio Armani that you get to look as nice as you do for us at every MQT. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Chair, is there a question?
It was a flourish. There were a lot of flourishes, Mr. Mayor. There were a lot of flourishes. However, there's another question related to this, so perhaps you might come back on that. Assembly Member Cooper, please.
Thank you, Chair. I think we've just had a number of questions about donations and declarations. I just wondered if you knew how they compare to the previous mayor, the immediately previous to you. I know you may not have all of the details, so I have got one or two. I think he received a donation of $23,853 from JCB towards his wedding, a holiday worth £15,000 to Mustique with one of his many numerous wives. I'm not sure who donated that. A furnished office space valued at £7,000 odd, 85,000 in 1 year, and contributions from Lord Brownlow towards the refurb of the Downing Street flat when he was doing something else. The Electoral Commission obviously fined him for that in the end. I just wondered if you could give me some more details on this.
Well, Chair, I'll respond to the question that I've been asked. The member who asked the original question has gone all cherry pink now. I wonder why. But let me deal with the question that's been raised. So, when he was the mayor, he received suits from Jaeger, Boss, Eve Group. He received 7 pairs of shoes when he was mayor. He received a Hermes scarf. He received a Geox jacket. He received watches, cufflinks, champagne, Oakley sunglasses. He received shirts. He received handbags. We know now that one of those who went on a foreign trip with him wasn't declared on any register of interest, although she has shared with us what her interest was in relation to the previous
autobiography, I think.
mayor.
Yes.
We also know that, unlike me, his wedding was paid for by a donor. Indeed, his family accommodation was paid for by a donor during a cost of living crisis. And during a health crisis, he was having a party in Downing Street. So everyone can appreciate why it takes some hubris for one of Boris Johnson's biggest cheerleaders to have the audacity to raise issues of propriety with me, bearing in mind who his mentor and idol, bearing in mind what he did.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Assembly Member Giorgio.
I think we just need to clarify something. You mentioned a Hermes scarf and handbags. I don't remember the previous mayor walking around in those. I think what we're trying to ascertain is whether you've worn your posh Hugo Boss suits and your Giorgio Armani ones at meetings or any event that you've been to as mayor. This is about you, not the previous mayor or the mayor before him.
He doesn't like it, does he, Chair? So that the Hermes scarf costs £235. One will have to ask Boris Johnson or one of his partners.
Still cheaper than your suit, though, isn't it, Mr. Mayor?
Whether she wore those, the scarf. It may have been a male scarf. I'm not sure about the sort of scarves Hermes makes. I'm quite clear in relation to declaring any gift that I received, any donation I received. I also discovered, actually, Chair, that the previous mayor received more than £9,000 in gifts of clothing. And more than £221,000 in gifts and hospitality during his 8 years. I'll let him guess whether what I've received is more or less than him.
Thank you. The next question is about the future of micro-mobility, and it's in the name of Assembly Member Baker, please.
Thanks for your question. Dockless e-bikes and e-scooters offer a convenient travel option to many Londoners and make an important contribution towards achieving my sustainable transport goals. But poor parking can cause safety issues for a variety of people, particularly disabled and older people and people with buggies and small children. Providing parking space for dockless bikes is a decision for the relevant highway authority, and as boroughs are the highway authorities for 95%, I beg your pardon, of London's roads, dockless bike parking is primarily a matter for them. However, TfL is considering enforcement options on the roads for which it is the highway authority. In 2017, TfL worked with boroughs and other stakeholders to publish a code of practice on ductless cycle hire outlining the requirements and recommendations that operators are expected to follow in London and providing detailing on engagement, operational safety, parking and data requirements. The code made clear that schemes must be operated to avoid disruption, nuisance or obstruction. In 2018, this was updated to include e-bikes. TfL, London councils and the boroughs are exploring how to provide enough space for ductless bikes to be parked safely while ensuring they remain a viable active travel option. TfL has allocated local implementation plan funding this year to support boroughs with the design and implementation of bays. These bays are physically marked on the ground as opposed to the park anywhere or virtual bays which are visible only in rental apps. TfL is also planning the delivery of parking bays on its own network. In addition to this, in the absence of regulatory powers to manage rental e-bikes, TfL and London councils are working closely with boroughs to explore whether a single approach to managing rental e-bike and e-scooter services could work. As part of this, TfL is engaged with several domestic and international micro-mobility companies to understand their views.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and thanks for your understanding about how this issue is affecting many Londoners negatively. I think I'd like to ask what discussions you're having with operators directly or what discussions TfL are having directly to ensure that parked and discarded dockless e-bikes are not stopping Londoners who are walking and wheeling, getting about our city, particularly as, although in some cases there are parking bays, it doesn't seem like, as a matter of course, people who are using these dockless e-bikes are using them.
I know that Senator Member Baker, like me, has been approached by lots of our residents complaining about this nuisance on the pavement as they're trying to get through. Not only those with a buggy, not only those visually impaired, not only those who are disabled, but those of us who are fit and able have problems sometimes navigating our way around these buggies, particularly on limited pavement spaces. So we've raised this with the councils and those who operate these, the e-bikes and e-scooters. There is a challenge, which is some boroughs have individual agreements with these companies, others don't. But frankly speaking, it's an unregulated area, and she will have experienced, like I have, evidence of the Wild West. I mean, there are no rules, it appears. And so we are trying to convene the councils and the operators to try and get some cohesion there, because if these companies aren't careful, the public will soon, be anti these dockless bikes and dockless e-scooters and so on, which I think would be counterproductive. Bear in mind, we want to encourage active travel. So we're hoping councils and these companies are willing partners, because we need a solution, because what's happening now isn't working.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I absolutely agree with you, Mr Mayor, and I think that the risk you outlined, that there is a negative impact on the perception of cycling overall because of a particular form of cycling that at the moment is becoming a nuisance to people. And surely the solution is for the government to legislate, to give yourself and London boroughs powers to regulate dockless e-bikes. And I know you've previously agreed with this back in July, so I wonder, have you made this ask of ministers in your discussions with them?
Yeah, she raised a really important point in this area, which is, look, it's unregulated at the moment. There's individual agreements with some of the boroughs, not all of the boroughs. So we are speaking, we're always a bit nervous taking over powers from councils. We are speaking to the councils, TfL, City Hall, the councils, about a single approach with the government in relation to this area. This problem is more acute in London because we have more active travel in London than other parts of the country. And so those conversations are taking place. The DfT are receptive. Clearly, if you're the DfT, you'd like one approach from London rather than one approach from TfL, one approach from one council, one approach by the council. So those conversations are ongoing. I'm more than happy, Chair, to make sure the member, bearing in mind her interest, is kept updated of those conversations, because we want to make sure we have a one London approach, which means that more likely that our lobby requests will land with the government.
Thank you very much. That would be much appreciated. Back to you, Chair.
The next question concerns employee well-being in the name of Assembly Member Bakari.
Thanks for your question. I'm committed to doing all I can to support the well-being of all employees at TfL and actually across the GLA family. At TfL, the health and well-being of employees is at the heart of its colleague and safety strategies. TfL views employee well-being holistically, considering the emotional, physical, social and financial experiences of their staff. TfL has a dedicated occupational health and well-being team working towards a vision for well-being based around the principles that employee well-being is everyone's responsibility, that this message should be unified and consistent, and that interventions should be evidence-based and targeted. Support available to TfL employees includes its employee assistant programme, trauma-focused counselling, physiotherapy and peer supporters, some of whom are specifically trained to support colleagues exposed to trauma. Preventative health and wellbeing checks are also available via the Well at TfL initiative, which has benefited hundreds of colleagues. Feeling physically safe is crucial to employee wellbeing. Everybody has the right to work without fear of being assaulted, abused or threatened. In August, TfL launched a new campaign to tackle violence and aggression against staff in the transport network, sending a strong message to offenders that this isn't tolerated on its services. TfL staff have been supported with a new programme on conflict management training for customer-facing operational teams working in high-risk locations, and early this year, TfL made body-worn video part of the essential kit for customer-facing staff. TfL continues to create an inclusive and diverse workplace. In 2023, it launched Action on Inclusion, a long-term strategy focused on 4 key objectives: fostering an inclusive culture, improving workforce representation, providing fairer internal opportunities, and delivering a future skills agenda. Employee wellbeing is measured every year in TfL's Viewpoint Engagement Survey. Responses are used to ensure that TfL's wellbeing offering continues to meet the needs of employees. I'm clear that TfL's high standards of employee wellbeing are also upheld on all TfL contracted services. These expectations are communicated and discussed during the contract tendering and renewal processes, and TfL continues to work closely with their contractors, providing ongoing support to meet these standards. I'm proud that TfL remains an attractive place to work. Safeguarding the well-being of its staff strengthens TfL's ability to attract and retain talent in order to keep its vital services working for London.
Thank you. Bus drivers have actually been in touch with me about their poor working conditions and well-being, and they're particularly concerned about the temperatures of over 35 degrees due to faulty air conditioning systems within their cabs. Now, I've been told that many of them are being asked to drive these vehicles with faults and damage and made to feel like troublemakers when they raise these issues. So it's disappointing this is being allowed to happen under TfL's watch. And what do you plan to do to ensure that bus operators are providing safer working conditions for the bus drivers?
So, Chair, thanks for raising this issue. This issue was raised at the Transport Plenary, I think, by Member Garrett to the Commissioner, and so I went away because I think the issue was overheated cabins at the plenary. And I was reassured, which should reassure the member, that all TfL driver cabs are fitted with air conditioning, following vehicle specification. Bus operators, we've checked with them, they know this, have a duty of care to their staff and customers, and they're expected to review their cabins and working practices. If there's individual bus drivers who are driving buses that are too hot, if they don't feel confident reporting it to their bus operators, then they can go by their trade unions. There are whistleblowing routes as well. It's not acceptable for bus drivers to be in overheated cabins. That has an impact on fatigue, on safety of passengers, on safety of those out on the road. So I'd encourage them through you, and if you wouldn't mind passing this on, please report this. If you're scared to go to your employer, that's an issue in itself, but whistleblowing routes, trade unions and other ways, and let us know and we'll take action.
And some of those bus drivers are saying that they have every right to refuse to drive, and would you support those bus drivers if they think their conditions are unsafe?
Bus drivers, tube operators, anybody who works in public transport, actually anybody who works who is being asked to work in an unsafe environment should not work. That's a basic human right, and it's really important to join a trade union because they can make sure those rights are observed.
You mentioned also abuse. There has actually been an increase of 20% of increased abuse for bus drivers. And you've mentioned that you have got a programme in place. But however, despite the programme that you've just mentioned, there has been an increase of 20%. So what do you plan to do in the future to make sure that this does not continue on?
I'm going to reread the question I gave out, but I said it in my original answer, some of the things we're doing to address this issue, to remind her. So all our staff now, customer-facing, have body-worn videos on the Underground, which is a new development because we are concerned about this. The good news is the evidence shows when somebody wears a body-worn video, it deters people from behaving badly. There's a reduction in those wearing body-worn videos of assault and other abuse. Should also be aware of the impact it has on staff in relation to their morale, their mental health and so forth. We take it very, very seriously. We are prosecuting and changes in the law means there's additional sentences for those who assault or attack public transport staff. In the bus driver cabins, there's an intercall on all the time, so the driver can contact the centre who will take action in relation to anybody being abusive or violent. That includes police officers turning up at buses to arrest and take action against those abusing staff. So again, if she's been speaking to bus drivers or others in public transport who are concerned about this and they're not reassured by the steps taken, she can contact me and I'll make sure we follow that up anonymously. If she's worried about repercussions, I'm happy to do it in a discreet way so nobody has any repercussions against them.
Assembly Member Garrett has indicated.
Yeah, picking up this point about overheating cabs, and actually this time of year, underheating cabs is also a problem, perhaps more so. In fact, I was on a bus the other day where the driver was wearing a very bulky jacket and a balaclava, and I don't know if that was a fashion statement that he was making, but I was pretty cold on the bus and I didn't have a balaclava. So you've said correctly that TfL say that the buses need to have air conditioning and they need to have working heating, specifically for the driver in their cab. What the feedback I get from bus drivers is that is patchy. Do you not think TfL could do spot checks, could actually ensure that the thing that is supposed to happen is happening? Because what drivers say is that it isn't, and I'm just concerned that you're leaving it to the bus companies. I would like to see you and TfL proactively make sure that's happening.
So TfL are, in addition to going to garages and speaking to bus operators, they're working closely with Unite, who are the trade union that represent bus drivers, on this issue as well. Again, if he's got examples of defective air conditioning and the bus driver doesn't want to contact the bus operator, let me know. Because it could be, and I'm just giving a hypothetical, there are systemic issues at particular bus garages. So again, that helps us target the spot checks. And rather than being random, if we know bus garage A has got particular problems, we can target that more than other bus garages.
So TfL do spot checks. They don't publish the evidence from those spot checks. So if I asked to see what that data looks like, I wouldn't get it. Yeah, I'll speak to the TfL because some of these are in conversation with Unite, so I'll see what they can publish in relation to this year. Okay, thanks. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. The next question concerns the NPPF review and the London Plan, and it's in the name of Assembly Member Small Edwards.
Thanks for your question. The housing sector has been facing unprecedented challenges with a combination of economic conditions and construction costs significantly affecting delivery. These pressures are most acute in London, where housing needs are also higher. I'm keen to see what the final NPPF changes will be, noting that the Housing Minister recently expressed openness to ideas outside the detailed consultation. Other provisions are also still being developed in detail, such as brownfield passports. The process to develop the new London Plan is underway. As we look to drive up house building even further, a brownfield-first approach remains important to unlock development opportunities across the capital and optimise sites. The NPPF proposals provide a framework to support this, but it's not just about planning. This will also require investment in transport and other infrastructure. And as a priority, we need to tackle the barriers to building out the permissions already in place. That's just over 300,000 homes in London. My offices are working with the government on their new Homes Accelerator programme to identify these sites and take action. We need to maximise the capacity that exists in the opportunity areas, and we'll also need to bring forward new capacity in a way that optimises development opportunities. While the new plan will put in place the framework for meeting London's assessed housing need and for delivering high-quality, healthy neighbourhoods. To meet housing needs, we'll also be looking for a step change in approach from every part of the house-building sector and all levels of government. I also support the NPPF's stronger emphasis on social rent and other affordable housing. We'll continue working closely with boroughs to build on the success we've had in London, where in 22-23 we started building twice as many council homes than the rest of the country combined.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, for those comments. What steps will be taken to ensure that the upcoming London Plan review aligns with both the NPPF changes and local need in London?
Yes, so he'll be aware that by law we're required for the London Plan to be in accordance with the NPPF. If there's a conflict, frankly speaking, the NPPF rules, unfortunately. We are working in relation to getting our views across in relation to the national development management policies. He'll be aware that local plans must be in conformity with London Plan, which must be in conformity with NPPF. But we are working closely with MHCLG officers to make sure there is as little difference as possible, bearing in mind our plans are of a high spec and high standards and more pro-housing than previous national plans.
Thank you. And how will these policy changes affect the balance between market rate and affordable housing developments in London, particularly in areas of high housing demand and on grey belt developments?
I think this is probably the most important issue when it comes to future changes in policy. So he'll be aware that we undertake, when we prepare the London Plan, a strategic housing market assessment. It's called SHMARF, the acronym. That assesses the type of housing we need, the tenure, and gets the right balance. And it's an independent assessment in relation to the mix of new housing, because you're spot on. We need to make sure the houses that we're given permission to do in London is affordable, council, social rent, rather than it all being, market value for sale or luxury property and so forth. The really good news in relation to the first 3 months of this government is the draft NPPF around Greenbelt. The government is saying at least half should be affordable housing. And he'll be aware of our definition of affordable housing is meaningful rather than a dodgy one. And so that bodes well as well, but it's really important that assessment sets out the sort of tenure, and that'll help local councils in relation to what they should be given permission to as well. It's really important.
Yeah, I agree. Very encouraging developments. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. The next question concerns airport expansion and climate responsibilities, and it's in the name of Assembly Member Polanski.
Can I thank the member for his question? As the first mayor of a global city to declare a climate emergency with targets to be net zero by 2030, I take climate change extremely seriously. London is graded A for climate action by the Carbon Disclosure Project, the independent organisation that runs the global disclosure system for companies and cities. I agree with the recommendations of the Climate Change Committee on Airport Expansion, which states that any airport expansion shall only proceed within a policy framework that ensures compatibility with net zero carbon targets. London's airports play a vital role in supporting our economy and linking London with the world. But every sector of the economy must cut its emissions if we're going to avert a climate catastrophe. Aviation is a major polluter, and all decisions about expansion must be taken with the climate emergency in mind. As other sectors decarbonise, aviation will constitute an ever larger share of total UK emissions, even without expansion. Future growth in the sector cannot be justified on the grounds that decarbonisation in other sectors will provide benefits that can be absorbed by aviation. Every industry must be looking to improve. I've always been clear that I believe airports in London must be held accountable for addressing their environmental impacts and must prove they have mitigations in place before any expansion takes place. This can include enhanced plans for decarbonised travel to and from airports, but it must also include concrete plans to mitigate the climate impacts of aviation itself. Only 2 of the 6 airports serving London lie within the the Greater London boundary, and if we're to address the aviation carbon challenge and not merely move the carbon emissions around, then a national approach will be required. The new government has made clear that any expansion proposals will need to demonstrate that they're consistent with our binding climate change targets as well as noise and air pollution objectives. These are crucial factors in any decisions about expansion, alongside the consideration of any economic growth they might bring. I'll continue to scrutinise any future airport planning proposals and will seek to ensure they're compatible with the urgent need to reduce our emissions to tackle climate change.
Thank you very much. We've spoken about aviation a lot over the years, and it's good to see your journey on this, because it sounds increasingly you're becoming more and more clear that aviation expansion is not compatible with the net zero target as outlined in the Committee on Climate Change, but also in your own accelerated green pathway. Drilling down into the detail, maybe that's a bad metaphor, but looking at the Airport National Policy Statement, the ANPS, in 2022, this is the same statement that essentially enables Heathrow expansion. You said that this needed to be suspended immediately at a bare minimum. You said that to the previous government. What are you saying to the new government?
I'm against Heathrow expansion. I think Heathrow should be better, not bigger.
Good. And so with the ANPS, because that is the mechanism in order to stop Heathrow expansion, are you calling on this new government to also suspend that ANPS at a bare minimum?
I've made clear my views on Heathrow expansion. We've not discussed the issue of the policy he refers to.
Thanks. So that's good to hear on Heathrow expansion. Let's discuss the ANPS. You said to the last government that it should be suspended with immediate effect. What are you saying to the new government?
That, well, as I said in my answer, any aviation expansion has got to be compatible with our climate change commitments. And I welcome, in fact, statements from both the Chancellor and the Prime Minister in relation to this issue. The Chancellor said we would need to look at all evidence, including around the environment. And the Prime Minister said any conditions under which future expansion would happen would only happen if they were consistent with our binding climate change obligations, and also around noise pollution and also around air pollution.
So those are words, and I admit they're good words, they're not action. So for a third time, you said to the previous government to suspend the ANPS with immediate effect as a minimum. What are you saying to the new government specifically on ANPS with immediate effect?
Chair, I can repeat what I said 3 minutes ago, which is I've had no conversations with the government about the ANPS. The government knows my views.
Thank you. Will you commit to talking to the new government? You said that you're going to write a letter to Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor. You said that earlier today. Would you remind her about your comments about the ANPS?
I'm sure the government's well aware of my comments around the aviation expansion. The member's, of course, open to send the Chancellor and the Prime Minister what I've said in answer to his question 3 minutes ago.
Thank you. So would you co-write a letter with me to the Chancellor repeating your statement about the ANPS, because it's really important that if we want to stop Heathrow expansion, as I hear that you do, and that's great, the way to stop it is by making sure the ANPS is suspended with immediate effect. If you're not willing to do that, it sounds like you are saying that you want Heathrow expansion to be stopped, but you're not willing to take the action that would make that happen.
Look, the Deputy Leader of the Green Party can write to the Prime Minister and the Chancellor. He's welcome to do so. He won't be surprised to hear I won't be co-signing a letter with the Deputy Leader of the Green Party.
Thank you. So I think people have heard that the Green Party are showing climate leadership on this and the Mayor's just talking.
Unless it goes to the backyard. We saw the Green MP, who's for renewables. When it goes through his backyard, he's suddenly against renewables. Have you taken action against him? Have you disciplined him?
I mean, that's completely not true, but if we want to talk about other parties, should we talk about your gifts from United Airlines from the conversation about gifts?
Against him? Taken action against him?
Is this climate leadership? Thank you very much. No further questions.
Hypocrisy.
Mr. Mayor, this
is
not Assembly members' question time, it's Mayor's question
He's the Deputy of the Green Party. Show some leadership, surely.
The Mayor of London is not going to show any leadership, and the Chair of C40.
We see it every day in Parliament. We're seeing it now.
Sorry, I will stop.
Well, you know, you can carry on. It's just your time you're wasting. We'll move on to the next question and then forget that ever happened. The next question concerns responding to Commissioners' comments, and it's in the name of Assembly Member Desai.
Thanks for your question again on this issue. Sir Mark Rowley's been Commissioner for 2 years. In that time, he's laid out a clear plan for significant reform of the Met Police. He recently gave a speech reflecting on his time in the job so far and outlining the challenges facing the Met Police Service. He was joined by the Deputy Commissioner who set out the positive progress the Met Police Service has made so far, including publishing the new Met for London plan, a new approach to high harm offenders, and new training and development for frontline leaders. The Met Police Service is operating in an extremely challenging context. The previous government chronically underfunded the Met Police Service for over a decade, cutting police funding by more than £1 billion in real terms. Baroness Casey's review found that officer morale, particularly on the front line, had been damaged. We should not take for granted the hard work, commitment and daily heroism demonstrated by our police officers. Reform of the Met Police Service must include investing in the front line and ensuring that officers have the resources and training to do the best job they can. That's why I've repeatedly stepped in to fill the financial gap as much as possible, investing record amounts from City Hall to support the police. Despite the challenging context, we've made progress in London with the number of young people being injured with a knife, homicides, gun crime and burglary all down since 2016. I'll be complacent about the urgency of this work. I'm glad to now be working with a government that's prioritising crime and safety, that's set ambitious targets for reducing violence, and that's keen to work constructively with London.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So, the Commissioner said in his speech that, and I quote, "The abuse of officers and the silence of men in authority has led to a crisis in officer confidence," unquote. He also said that a third of officers were giving up their taser accreditation, and more than a quarter were surrendering their firearm tickets. Can you or will you update the Assembly about what MOPAC and the Commissioner are specifically doing to address this situation?
There's an issue the Commissioner also raised at the London Policing Board meeting most recently, and it comes from the speech that the member was present at as well. So there's a number of things that the leadership is doing in relation to police officer confidence in the use of the tools they have to keep us safe and to keep them safe, whether it's taser, whether it's firearms, or whether it's police baton and other issues as well. At the same time, he made the point for all of us to be cognizant about seeing a clip of, say, on social media and not being the full picture and not jump into conclusions. And I think it's a lesson we can all learn in all walks of life, not just policing as well. So we're working with the Commissioner and the leadership team to make sure we can address these issues. One of the things we're doing is, for example, making sure new recruits are buddied up with more senior officers to make sure they have the confidence to use the tools they have, whether it's stop and search, whether it's other issues as well, and for it to be intelligence-led, which is really important.
So, Mr. Mayor, the Commissioner talked about policing more people with less money. Well, you were asked questions much earlier this morning about the budget, the forthcoming budget rather. So what do you hope to see in this budget to address this particular situation, policing more Londoners with less money? And with extra responsibilities as well.
Yes, I mean, one of the challenges we have is our population has risen by more than 1 million since 2016. We've had massive cuts from central government. To give you an idea of the scale of the challenge, when I first became mayor, less than 20% of funding for the Met Police Service came from City Hall. Because of the previous government's cuts, that's now almost 30% we fund from City Hall to try and fill the massive hole left by the previous government. We can't, with the best will in the world, have that gap closed straight away, but it needs to be closed in medium to long term. The gap for 25-26 is circa £400 million between the budget the Commissioner would like to set and the budget he thinks he's going to receive. That means prioritising, but also means some things that the police want to do not being done. And the Commissioner's been quite frank in relation to those choices that we'll have to make.
Thank you. The Commissioner also warned that half of the Met's policing premises are at risk of closure in the next decade. What are you doing, Mr. Mayor, to ensure that this will not be the case, or is not the case? And how will you ensure, and forgive me for raising this point, that the state strategy, when we do have it, is implemented without leaving communities exposed?
Well, I think the first part of your question explains the delay in the state strategy, because what we've had to do in the past 14 years is sell off police property and use the receipts to pay for officers. So we're using capital receipts to pay for revenue running costs, which is no way to run an organisation, particularly one that's got a budget of around £4 billion. Over the last few years, we've received no money from central government around capital, so no money for paying the bills, no money for vehicles, no money for kit, no money for buildings. And the quality of those buildings is getting worse and worse and worse. Some buildings, I'm told, has water coming through the ceilings. That's not buildings fit for police officers serving a 21st century global city. So the point the Commissioner's making is him being quite frank, saying unless there are monies to improve and remediate these buildings, unless there is money to pay for revenue, he may have no choice but to sell off some more capital to pay for revenue to keep our city safe.
I think I should make the point, Mr. Mayor, that and this was raised with Deputy Mayor, I think, in the last appearance, about the state strategy, that the sooner we have it, the better, because I think there are some issues that we can sort of talk about in the context of the Commissioner's remarks.
One of the challenges the Commissioner has is these straight strategies for a police service that's 34,000, 35,000 and 32,000. And those are some of the things he's grappling with a budget for 25-26, for example.
Sure. Okay, I'm thinking in particular of the buildings that's been empty for so long. Mr. Mayor, in September, or last month that is, I visited the Bethnal Green project in Whitechapel to mark 6 years since the violence reduction unit, the VRU, was was formed. I want to commend your progress in giving young people an alternative to crime. Under 18s are now half as likely to offend or re-offend since the creation of the unit. To what extent is the unit responsible for this trend? And how do you plan on building on the VRU going forward?
Yes, so thank you for raising this really important issue. He'll be aware that the VRU was set up in 2019. It took us some time to get it off the ground. It's the first one in England or Wales, and we learned lessons from Glasgow. So since it was set up in 2019, we've seen a reduction in homicides, a reduction in under 25s being injured with a knife, a reduction in robbery since the VRU was set up. The VRU itself has provided constructive things for young people, like you mentioned, including 350,000 diversionary activities, supporting parents in relation to the network. It's helped schools get a London Inclusion Charter to keep our children inside schools rather than being excluded, providing funding for after-school clubs, the Minds project, which I know he's well aware of and stuff. We're concerned, though, we've not got certainty for future funding. So we're using the evidence of success over the last few years to persuade the government to fund the VRU going forward, which is really important.
Thank you. And finally, Mr. Mayor, and this is a topic that will be coming to over the coming weeks. Last week, the Director General of MI5, Ken McCallum, warned that Russia is seeking, and I quote, to cause chaos on UK streets, unquote. And he also said that Iran is planning, quote, plot after plot, unquote. How will you work with our intelligence services to guard against state-sponsored sabotage? And this is obviously a national issue as well, and which has resource implications. Will you sort of use the remarks of the Director General to lobby government of the need to give us more resources, more funding?
I think the DG himself said that he wouldn't comment on ongoing budget conversations, but I think the point he makes is really important. We are the capital city. We are a global city. We know that there are bad actors targeting our city, not just lone, forgive me for the jargon experts use, not just lone wolf actors, but state actors as well. It's a serious concern. You mentioned two of the countries that are a source of concern for the DG. There are individuals who are radicalised, brainwashed and so forth as well, which is a source of concern. The vast majority of attacks prevented, the DG referred to some of them, I think 73, this number he gave, are in London. And so it is a huge source of concern, and I can reassure him that in terms of conversations we have with the government, but also the Met Police Service, MI5, MI6 have, these issues are raised with them, so the government understands the concerns that we have. The phrase used by experts is not a question of if, it's a question of when, and that's why it's really important we're vigilant.
Can I just say, Mr. Mayor, that I was at an event where the Director General made the same comments, but in even more starker terms. Thank you.
Thank you. Assembly Member Bailey to come back.
Thank you, and good afternoon, Mayor. I want to talk about this question of police morale. The Commissioner talked about the effect that politicians have had on police morale, and I think we can all agree on that. But I wonder if you could go back to him and start to have a conversation about the effect that the actions of very senior police officers are having on rank and file officers. I walk with a number of officers, and the biggest conversation we've had in the last month is what happened with the TfL case and the woman who refused to show her ticket. We don't need to rehearse the case, but I think sometimes senior officers are not aware that their actions are even more impactful on the morale of police officers than even politicians. And I wonder if you're having that conversation with him, and does he have any ideas how he can improve the communication between the very top and the front line?
Well, thank you for raising the issue. I'm happy to look into the issue he's referring to and stuff. I mean, the Commissioner and his top team, I spend a lot of time out and about with not just the community, but also police officers as well. But I'll pass on the concern he's raised to make sure that's looked into.
Thank you. And the major issue is a decisiveness and acting as if they're on the side of police officers. There's a low-level rumbling that they are responding to outside forces before they're thinking of the effect it will have on their own officers. Thank you. Back to you, Chair.
Thank you. Will the Assembly agree to suspend Standing Order 2.9b in order to allow the remaining business on the agenda to be completed?
Go on then.
The next question concerns property standards, and it's in my name and will be on the clock. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Chair. All Londoners deserve a safe and decent home, and the standard of homes in London has been steadily improving over the last 17 years. According to calculations based on the English Housing Survey and MHCLG data, previous government's data, the number of homes in London estimated to be below the official decent home standard fell from 1,189,000 in 2006 to 376,000 in 2022. That's good news, but even with these improvements, there are still too many Londoners living in homes with serious problems, including toxic mould and dangerous cladding. It's a shocking indictment of the slow pace of change in the housing industry that 7 years after the Grenfell tragedy, more than a third of high-rise buildings with unsafe cladding are yet to start remediation works. 14% of privately rented homes in London failed to meet the decent home standard in 2021, along with 8% of homes in the social rented sector after the previous government ended funding for the pioneering Decent Homes programme. I don't have the powers or resources to fix all these problems, but I've taken action to improve things whenever I can. We've introduced high safety and design standards for new homes delivered both through the planning system and through my housing programmes. We've told social housing providers that their access to funding to build new homes can be restricted if they don't meet regulatory standards and don't have a clear plan to put things right. Our private rented sector partnership of all London boroughs and our Better Renting programme both help improve standards for private renters. But there's still much more to do, which is why I've made improving London's existing housing stock a priority. I'm committed to ensuring that Londoners live in fairer, safer and greener homes. To achieve this, I'll support boroughs to use their licensing powers to regulate the private rented sector and seek further devolution of powers to London. I'll work closely with the government on our joint priorities of building and fire safety and continue to advocate for the bereaved survivors and community of Grenfell. We're working to establish effective cross-London structures to retrofit delivery, full retrofit delivery, and trying to unlock wider uptake of retrofit measures. Many of the levers to improve the condition of London's homes sit with the government, and I'll work with them closely to improve the condition of existing homes.
Thank you. Do you regret that 50 residents of Hyde House in Beckenham, London living rent tenancies, have been issued with Section 21 eviction notices after some period of time of having to put up with damp, mould infestations? Do you regret that?
It's heartbreaking for those 50 families in relation to what's happening, and it's really important all those families are rehoused in decent accommodation.
Will you review the procedures for those offering the London Living Rent product? Because if it's as being the London Living Rent, it's got the sort of stamp of your approval on it being your scheme. Will you review who's allowed to offer those?
I think no one would take away the distress caused to these 50 families, but in percentage terms, when you're talking about 116,000 homes given permission, 60,000 completed, I've not got a calculator, but 50 of those homes have caused a problem. So I'm not sure the whole system needs review. All we need to do is make sure lessons are learned in relation to this particular provider. Is it systemic with this provider? Is there an issue in relation to this particular scheme? Other schemes are provided, and I'm sure all those sorts of questions have been asked and are being asked by the relevant teams.
Mr. Mayor, do you think Jazz Athwal should be on the rogue landlords register?
If he's been convicted or prosecuted, then he should be.
One of the problems with your rogue landlord and agent checker is that it rather relies on the boroughs to provide that information. It's only as good as that information. Would you encourage Redbridge to review their procedures and see who it is that they are prosecuting?
The main problem with the rogue landlord register is the previous government failed to support us, probably because most of their MPs were landlords. The good news is we have published yesterday the Renters' Rights Bill, and this government is working with us to make sure we can have a proper rogue landlord register with the support of the government. That will mean that all councils, registered housing providers and others will understand this government takes seriously the rights of tenants, and unlike the last 8 years, prior to July the 4th, going forward we'll have the support of the government, which is welcome.
I mean, just to correct something you said there, of course the biggest landlord MP is Jazz Athwal. But what about contacting Redbridge? It appears as though they've fallen rather short. You just commended, for example, you've asked boroughs to use their licensing powers. And Jazz Athwal was very enthusiastic about the licensing scheme that he put into Redbridge and then failed to avail himself of that obligation. Do you think Redbridge should be looking into their procedures with regard to their licensing scheme?
If Mr. Athwal or any landlord has been successfully prosecuted and he's not on the landlord register, that's an issue for me. If he's got evidence for being prosecuted, then please let me know.
Do you think that, as I go back to what I said before, that the rogue landlord and agent checker is only as good as the information that's coming to the borough from the boroughs? If the boroughs aren't doing their job, then what value is the rogue landlord and agent checker?
Well, I think it's just worth explaining to him that because of a failure of regulation from the previous government, the rogue landlord checker is a voluntary scheme we have set up from City Hall. It has got no teeth without central government support. We now have a government from the centre that supports renters, so hopefully the rogue landlord checker will have teeth going forward. But also now we've got a pro-renters government, we'll have more robust licensing schemes going forward. So it isn't going to be on the whim of a good council or a good city hall, but have the support and backup of the government, including a Renters' Rights Act once that becomes the law as well.
So I went round the flats at Jazz Athwell's place, and I saw some pretty poor conditions, may I say. Was that all the government's fault, or was it Jazz Athwell's?
Well, I think councils have been starved of resources. They've not got enough officers to take action against dodgy landlords. It's the fault of 14 years of austerity. The deregulation of the housing market in the 1980s is the fault of the government of the 1980s. Some of these systemic issues will be fixed by the new government elected on July the 4th. And the bill published yesterday, the Rights Reform Bill, is light years away from the bill published a couple of years ago. And so we will see improvements made in the conditions of those renting from private landlords and those renting from social landlords going forward. It's long overdue.
So no, you're going to take no action with regard to the conditions that Jazz Athwell's tenants had to live in. The Labour Party in Redbridge is not going to take any action. The Labour Party in Parliament has taken no action. Who should be taking action against him?
Well, I can't comment on issues outside my powers. What I can do is to make sure that we have a good relationship with the government to improve the Renters' Rights Bill, to make sure it supports more Londoners. Over the last 14 years, they've had very little support from the government. I think Londoners are hoping, particularly those that rent, they get more support going forward.
Ms. Mayor, I know you're avoiding all the questions that I'm giving and putting it in there, blaming previous governments. There's one thing I would ask you. You probably get on better terms with Jazz Athwell than I am, or will be again. Perhaps you could, bearing in mind that Mr. Athwell has blamed the conditions of his properties on the managing agent, would you like to persuade him to actually let us know who that managing agent is, so that we can warn prospective tenants that they are at some risk if they go to that particular agent?
I think you'll find I get on with most people better than you do, not just the person you're talking about. But if he's concerned in relation to, I think somebody likes you. If he's concerned in relation to Mr. Athwell, he can raise them directly with him.
Thank you very much. We'll now go back to Assembly Member Bailey, please.
You are correct, Mayor. I do like our very own Andrew Boff. He's a unique character.
But did you support him when he was thrown out of Tory conference last year?
Yes, I did.
Did you?
Yes, I did. Yes, I did. And he and I have both been thrown out of far better places than Tory conference. I just want to go back to the county house situation. Given am I correct in saying that this was a permitted development? It was a modified office block. That's what the reporting says.
Yeah, I think so. But basically what happened was, if you remember, there was a system to convert office to housing, which sort of circumvented some of the rules. We worked in partnership with the housing provider for the London Live and Rent product. But it's been an awful experience for those 50 residents who are now being asked to leave.
The question I want to ask, given your vocal opposition to permit to develop, your Deputy Mayor's vocal opposition to that, why was this particular building, why was this scheme brought forward? Because everything you've always talked about, and you said were the risk of property development, have come to light here. Why did the team do this?
Because there were an offer of 50 homes that otherwise those 50 families wouldn't receive. And when you speak to those families, they bit their hands off. I met some of them. I delivered the keys to some of them in relation to getting a new home. You'll be aware one of the problems with office buildings being used for housing is they're not built for being occupied most of the time. They're used for 9-to-5 accommodation and stuff. So things like damp and mould don't impact an office as they would a housing and stuff. And that's one of the reasons why we try to persuade the previous government, we hope it's with this government, to minimise the use of PD when it comes to office to resi.
Thank you. I'm going to stop because of the benefit of time, but it just strikes me that everybody knew this was going to happen. It has happened, and it could have been avoided. And you make the comment that they needed those 50 homes, but now they don't have them. And I just feel like it could have been avoided, particularly with what you and your Deputy Mayor have always said.
But the member suggesting that we shouldn't house anybody in homes that are converted from office to...
No. I'm suggesting that your Deputy Mayor has suggested that many times. That's what I'm suggesting.
No, we're against those conversions because they circumvent planning rules. What we think that should happen is you can convert office to resi, but go through an application process.
I'm going to stop. Thank you, Mayor, because time.
Thank you. The next question on the order paper concerns net zero in London, and it's in the name of Assembly Member Turrell. Sorry.
Thank you for your question. To be more accurate, at September's Parliament Committee meeting, the chair of the London Sustainability Commission, Ashok Sinha, said of the likelihood of meeting our 2030 net zero target that out of 10, and I quote, if we just continue with what we're doing, we're at a 2 or 3. But if the government and council leaders make the right decisions over the coming years, that could rise up to 8 or 9. I share Ashok Sinha's frustrations as we've had to put up with 14 years of indecision, delay and denial from the previous national government when it comes to the biggest challenge facing our country and city this century. I'm determined to make the right decisions to ensure we do meet our ambitious 2030 target, and I share the relief of many climate leaders around the world that we now have a UK government that will do the same. We've made a good start. In my first term, we reduced London's carbon emissions by 19%. We've expanded TfL's zero-emission bus fleet, which now has over 1,600 zero-emission buses, the largest fleet in Western Europe, working towards a fully zero-emission fleet by 2030. We've increased London's EV charging network to over 20,000 charging points, of which over 1,200 are rapid charging points. A third of the country's electric vehicle charging network is in London. We're aiming to have 40,000 by 2030. London's proudly the world's capital for green finance. My flagship London Climate Finance Facility with programs like the Green Finance Fund and the Zero Carbon Accelerator will be critical in making progress towards net zero. But to hit our target, we do need to make tackling the climate emergency central to all our work. That's why we've launched climate literacy training for all GLA staff, and I'm committed to embedding climate in all our programmes and projects across the GLA. I want all Londoners to see the benefits of climate action. That's why when it comes to retrofit and energy generation and supply, I want to take a socially just approach, benefiting the most vulnerable Londoners first.
Thank you for that answer, Mr. Mayor, and good afternoon. I think the key part from the quote we keep going back to is the just continuing as we are, which implies that the current plan is not going to hit that target. At that committee meeting, it was also discussed that one of the reasons is actually trying to incentivise the boroughs, and it's the fact that the boroughs don't have the resource or the incentives at the moment to meet this target. So as part of your negotiations and lobbying of the government ahead of the budget, is this something you will be lobbying them to provide to the boroughs?
Yeah, thanks for raising that issue. Yes, but additionally, what we're doing is working with the boroughs in relation to a plan to retrofit the homes as part of the work of the London Partnership Board. You'll be aware that actually retrofitting individual owner-occupier homes is quite cumbersome, but actually the councils, because of council property, have quite a number of homes. So question, is there a way we can, in scale, retrofit those homes, which makes those homes have smaller bills, but also helps us in relation to our climate change objectives. So we definitely are working closely with those boroughs.
Thank you for that, Mr. Blair. At the same meeting, the Chair of the Commission also mentioned the uncertainty around the future of the Commission's work because they haven't yet been renewed or reappointed. Can you clarify to this Assembly that the Commission will be renewed?
Well, the new Deputy Mayor's hit the ground at blistering pace, and I'm sure when he slows down, he'll look into the issue of the Commission's work being looked into and stuff. I'll make sure he responds to the member as well about what the latest plans are in relation to the work of the Commission.
Thank you. Back to you, Chair.
Thank you. The next question... Sorry? Oh, no. The next question concerns the London Partnership Board and London's response to the national missions, and it's in the name of Assembly Member Cooper.
Thanks for your question. Good afternoon. The London Partnership Board was established in March 2023 to bring together London's senior leaders from London Government, the public sector, private sector, trade unions and civil society to address the complex and cross-cutting challenges facing our city. The board's already agreed joint action on some major challenges, including supporting Londoners through the rising cost of living, making an economic case for housing and giving young people access to the skills they need for future jobs in the green economy or as entrepreneurs. I'm proud to co-chair the board alongside Councillor Claire Holland, the chair of London Councils. The board has shown that by working together we can deliver more for the city than any one organisation can alone. The new government has brought new energy and commitment to tackling the UK's challenges, and unlike the previous government, they understand how important London is to achieving national renewal. In September, at its first meeting since the election, the board agreed to match the government's ambition and establish 6 new missions for London to drive real change. These missions will focus on some of the most complex challenges facing the city: growth, housing delivery, energy and the environment, safety, opportunity and health.
Thanks very much. I understand that focusing on the missions, the 6 missions which you've just outlined, is going to be done through convening some workshops, and that growth and housing are going to be the 2 initial key priorities. What would you say your vision is for these missions, and in particular housing and growth?
Yeah, thanks for your question. I mean, you'll be aware that the government's main focus is getting growth across the country. London's going to be integral to a national growth plan. So we're currently working on a London growth plan. We've identified some of our sectors which are fast-growing: tech, fintech, culture and so forth. And so working with those industries, we're coming up with a growth plan to see what we can do to accelerate and those sectors. Howard Dorber, the Deputy for Business, is going out working with the Mayor of Croydon, Jason Perry, speaking to boroughs, communities across London. Working also with business representative groups to make sure that they input their ideas. We're keen to feed that in draft form to the budget, in substantive form to the spending review coming forward next spring. In relation to housing, we're keen to support the government's target of 1.5 million homes in the first parliamentary term, with a big chunk being in London. Conversations with the government in relation to an issue raised by James Small-Edwards, the national policy, the national planning policy framework, changes in relation to the blockages that currently are in the planning system, issues of funding clearly in relation to this, including increasing capacity of councils and housing associations. And we think actually housing is linked to growth. You'll be aware from the work we've done in the past, linked with infrastructure and housing. Infrastructure often frees up housing. So we're trying to say to the government, one goes with the other, and we're hoping the argument lands.
Okay, thanks. That's a very helpful update for us. I wondered if I could also ask you something about the UK Shared Prosperity Fund. That funding has been supporting key projects, supporting various businesses and communities, and also skills for Londoners. We've had a budget of 144.5 million running over 2022, ending in March 2025, and I think the LGA, the Local Government Association, said that creates a cliff edge. So they're looking for that funding to be extended for 1 year and then asking for multi-year settlements thereafter. What does London need from the UK Shared Prosperity Fund beyond March 25 going forward?
Just to remind colleagues, you should know this, but the UK Shared Prosperity Fund was supposed to replace the funding we received from the European Union. Taking back control was the jargon used at that stage. The money we received in the UK Shared Prosperity Fund is less than half what we received from the European Union. So we're asked to do the same or more with less than half. And you're spot on. That money runs out in March next year. Many of it is used to help us in areas of growth by training up Londoners to have the skills for the jobs being created, those in long-term unemployment or in minimum wage jobs getting the skills to get better paid jobs. And you're spot on, it runs out in March, but also the CSR doesn't bite until spring, and that CSR will be from 26 onwards, not 25. So we are working together to try and persuade the Treasury to give us at least 1 year's worth of funding, because often these schemes, if you stop funding something and you turn the tap off, you can't then turn it back on a year's time, because people have got jobs, those organisations have closed down, those young people have gone elsewhere. So it's really important for us to persuade the government to give us at least a year's worth of funding to keep it going until the CSR money starts bearing fruit.
So does it look as though that argument is starting to land?
Well, you mentioned the LGA, who are really good allies in this area and stuff, because there's good work across the country in relation to parts of the UK Shared Prosperity Fund. We won't know, frankly speaking, until the budget at the end of this month, until the and then the CSR next year.
Okay, so this is another budget-related item, so we don't know at this stage. Okay. Well, thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, and no doubt we'll be coming back to this in the future. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. The next question concerns Londoners' access to youth services, and it's in the name of Assembly Member Garrett.
Thanks for this question.
Garbett. There's only a few letters different between us.
I think there's a case for defamation from Zoe, by the way, not from Neil. I'm committed to working tirelessly to ensure young Londoners are given the helping hand they deserve to fulfil their potential and to achieve their aspirations. For too long, the odds have been stacked against young people who've often bore the brunt of societal challenges. Over the last 14 years, the previous government's austerity measures led to cuts to vital public services in London. I know from Sean Berry's 2021 investigation that between 2011 and 2021, at least 133 youth centres were lost in London, plus at least 611 youth workers. These services provide safety for young people and an opportunity to thrive, and their loss will have had a huge detrimental impact on thousands of young people across London. On top of that, for some, the COVID-19 pandemic led to lost learning and a disrupted education, whilst research commissioned by City Hall showed a clear link between a rise in the cost of living that ensued and an increase in violence and robbery offences. Taking these challenges directly, I want to ensure that London becomes a byword of opportunity once again. As Mayor, I've prioritised breaking down barriers to ensure young people can access all the opportunities this great city gave to me and my family. We've invested record amounts in youth clubs and services, providing more than 500,000 positive opportunities for young people, delivered through our Violence Reduction Unit and our mentoring and sports programmes. We've funded additional youth workers and mentors and delivered programmes inside and outside school hours to divert young people away from criminal gangs and towards training and employment. We will build on this progress this term, working alongside a government that for the first time shares my ambition to support young people, working towards providing a further 250,000 positive opportunities for young people, helping young people access youth clubs and sports hubs, as well as investment in the critical role played by youth workers and mentors. My plans also include expanding the summer provision for young people through a boosted Holiday Hope programme, providing young people with something to eat and access youth services during the school holidays to keep them safe when we know they're more vulnerable to exploitation.
Thank you for that response, and we did agree on this during the campaign, and I'm glad you've referenced Sean Berry MP's great work on this, who persistently raised this being an Assembly member, and I'm here to continue that great work. And like you, I've visited many youth centres and have seen how incredible they are, and hearing from young people, parents and grandparents, that they're just life-saving facilities, access to mentors, children being able to play, leading environmental projects, pursuing interests and being active citizens. So I've done an FOI to councils which shows that youth service funding per child has reduced across most boroughs, but the data varies. So funding for some children in some boroughs have fallen to almost zero, whilst in other boroughs they've nearly doubled. So I'm really concerned that not every Londoner is getting the same opportunity, and that we've got this postcode lottery of youth services. So I want to see children in Harrow and Hounslow, Camden and Croydon all having the same opportunities. So I'm asking if you agree that it isn't right that children in different parts of London have got this wildly different access to services.
So I think we're going to be careful with those stats, because some of that is based upon the funding the council gives. Some of the funding we would give, some of the funding is given by the partners. Now, what we're trying to do with taxpayer money is to fill the holes in our city that families can't fill. So there are some parts of our city where parents have enough money to pay for services. In other parts of our city, there are deserts for youth facilities. Our focus has been on the deserts, those communities, and I don't like the phrase, but it's a phrase that's used, deprived communities. I call them underserved communities. So our focus has been on the underserved communities, and we also map that with where there are most young people, and also, frankly speaking, where there's the largest number of youth crime. And that's been our focus. So the Minds project began in those areas of vulnerability for young people, for obvious reasons that you can understand. The idea is they add to the services already being provided. So many young Londoners already go to, for example, a uniformed youth facility, Boys Brigade, Girls Guides, Cubs, so forth. We don't subsidise those for obvious reasons. So I take with a pinch of salt the numbers that she's got. But the ambition is to give every young person opportunity to do constructive things.
Yeah, so I think that's the principle and the point that I'm speaking to, is that making sure that all children in London have the same opportunities. And we don't want to see any more cuts to youth services. I've been hearing from councils that they are considering that within this coming year because their budgets continue to be, under pressure. So in January, you wrote really powerfully about the principle of universalism. So this principle, I think, should be applied to youth services. And to quote you in that article, you state that universalism defines society, demonstrating that we are part of a society bigger and that everyone is worth the same. I'm slightly worried at what I'm seeing from the new Labour government, that they've rowed back on this principle, for example, cutting the winter fuel tax. So your article was titled "Labour is at its best when it embraces universalism in government." So I wanted to see if you've been pushing the Labour government to invest in all children along this line of universal access to youth services.
Yes, so certainly for those who haven't read the Fabian speech, it was a great speech, one of the better ones, around universalism. So the issue is how we use the finite resources we have in relation to the short term. My ideal is a universal system of youth provision. It's really important. I think services for poor people tend to be poor services. That's my experience.
That's what you said in your article.
That's my experience as somebody who was a poor child, but who's got children who are middle class.
So have you been pushing the government for that principle of universal youth services?
I think the government's well aware of my views on universalism.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. The next question concerns Hogarth Roundabout, and it's in the name of Assembly Member Prince.
Thanks for your question. Recent data from TfL shows that fatalities in 2023 have reduced by 30% in London against the 2010 to 2014 baseline, to the lowest number on record outside of the pandemic-affected year of 2021. In comparison, fatalities for the rest of Great Britain fell by just 7%. This shows that our visions or approach to reducing road danger in London is working. Both TfL and I remain committed to making our streets safer by working to eliminate deaths and serious injuries from the transport system by 2041. Hogarth Roundabout is in the top 10% of junctions in London for road safety risk. There's an urgent need to make changes to the road layout to address the safety risk at the roundabout. At the same time, TfL would like to improve accessibility, make the surrounding area greener, and help to reconnect the historic riverside area of Old Chiswick with Chiswick High Street. The scheme has been designed according to TfL's Healthy Streets approach, which aims to make London a safer, healthier and greener place to live and travel. The proposed changes include creating a dedicated left turn lane from A4 westbound traffic onto the A316, where the highest concentration of collisions occur, and providing advanced stop lanes for cyclists at all approaches to the roundabout. The proposed scheme is safety-led, and the closure would address a collision hotspot between vehicles, particularly in the morning peak. It would also improve safety for road users most at risk, such as cyclists and pedestrians. TfL consulted on the scheme between 11th of July and 12th of September 2024, presenting the problems and potential solutions. It's now considering the responses. I understand TfL carried out pre-consultation engagement with key stakeholders and continue to engage with stakeholders throughout the consultation period and beyond. This included engagement and briefings with local businesses, including Fuller's Brewery, residents, Hounslow Borough officers and the local church, to listen to concerns about and suggestions for the proposed scheme. TfL also held 4 public drop-in events during the consultation period and attended the Chiswick Area Forum on the 24th of September to listen to local concerns and provide reassurances. As with all consultations, TfL will carefully consider the feedback received and make a decision based upon this and other factors, including the safety benefits of the proposals. TfL will keep local residents updated on the publication of the consultation report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I absolutely applaud the ambition, but having been there and with my researcher, we tried to make that left-hand turn. It was virtually impossible. Also, this will block off Church Street, and that means that people would have to use Chiswick Mall instead, which is all very good on paper. Unfortunately, I don't know if you're aware, Mr. Mayor, this is what I'd like you or maybe the Deputy Mayor to visit. That road floods twice a day, because twice a day it becomes part of the River Thames. So whilst on paper the proposal looks good, in practical form it doesn't. And there's churches there, there's residents, and the church conducts funerals, so it would be really inconvenient for people to have to postponed their funeral while they waited for the Thames to lower in order for them to get the hearse down the road. So I really would appreciate it if someone could just look at these really practical issues that this proposal is putting forward.
Chair, can I thank the Member for raising the points and the way he's raised them. I'm more than happy for the Deputy Mayor or the Walk Inside Commissioner to join the local member, I think it's Member Roberts, and Member Prince for a site visit to discuss these issues, and we'll organise it convenient to both members.
More than welcome Assembly Member Roberts to come along. Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you. Assembly Member Best, please.
Thank you, Mayor. On this particular issue, one of the concerns was the misleading information TfL gave around the roundabout. And that's one reason why, when it comes to things like the floating bus stops, this Assembly cross-party agreed that we should have an independent review into floating bus stops, not one led by TfL. Is that a call that you support?
No, it isn't.
Okay. The next question has been withdrawn. Next question is withdrawn, and Caroline Russell will now speak very, very quickly concerning the housing for women leaving the criminal justice system.
I'm pleased that my Deputy Mayors for Policing and Crime and also Housing and Residential Development, as well as officers, have engaged extensively with London Prisons Mission. Later this month, Tom Copley and Assembly members will be meeting with the mission again as part of a visit to HMP Bronzefield. I'm grateful to London Prisons Mission for their commitment and ongoing work in this area. I'm committed to ensuring that City Hall does everything in its power and influence to support better outcomes for women leaving prison. Being released to a safe home is critical.
And now I have to stop you, Ms. Mayor. I do apologise, but
Thank you.
We're out of time. Actually, we all want to hear the reply to that. We're all very much want to see this play out. So, we can't donate our time to you, unfortunately, Councillor Assembly Member Russell.
I'll make sure that all colleagues get a copy of the letter in relation to the answer I was going to give.
I'd be very grateful for that. It's a very important issue. And now a very speedy question from Assembly Member Georgiou concerning building safety.
Chair, no time is short. I'm happy to send the member my answer in writing if he's got any oral supplementaries to bring in.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, and I appreciate that due to time consideration. So very briefly, the gist of this interaction that I want to get out of it was making sure that TfL and Places for London went above and beyond the Grenfell report to make sure that we are not just doing the bare minimum, but as much as possible to ensure that future developments are as safe as possible following the Grenfell disaster.
Can I thank you for giving me advance notice of his question on this area and stuff. So he spotted our ambition should be Grenfell is the floor in relation to what we should be doing, the basic minimum. The tenor of what he's saying is spot on. We should be setting an example to everybody else, whether it's Places for London or other bodies we fund. And as part of the funding agreement, we make sure our standards are higher. And it's really important we do set an example.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Actually, that's... yeah. Excuse me. Panicking about partiality. Those are all the questions answered. Mr. Mayor, you're free to go. Can I ask the Assembly to agree the motion which is set out on the agenda in my name, which is that the Assembly notes the answers to the questions asked? The next item 6 is noting that a dispensation has been granted to members in relation to this decision by the GLA's monitoring officers. Can I ask the Assembly, acting jointly with the Mayor, to approve the 2024 salary determination attached to Appendix 1 to replace and supersede the previous 2022 determination? Item 7, can I ask the Assembly to note the Confirmation Hearing Committee's decision further to its meeting held on the 3rd of September 2024 and as set out in Appendix 2 that the Mayor should proceed with the proposed appointment of Suki Kalirai to the office of Chair of London Legacy Development Corporation. Can I ask the Assembly further to note, further to the Assembly Labour Group's nomination, appoint Assembly Member Mahfouz as member of the GLA Oversight Committee to replace Assembly Member Duval. Agreed. And turning to recommendation 2.2, I will now take nominations for the office of Deputy Chair of the Planning and Regeneration Committee for the remainder of the 24-25 Assembly year. Assembly Member Cooper.
I'd like to nominate Assembly Member Small Edwards.
Assembly Member McCartney to second. Are there any other nominations? I declare, therefore, that Assembly Member Small Edwards as elected as the Deputy Chair of the Planning and Regeneration Committee for the remainder of the 2024-25 Assembly year. Congratulations, Assembly Member. It is the nicest committee. Okay. So I was doing so well. The next scheduled meeting of the London Assembly will be the plenary meeting, which will take place on at 10 a.m. on Thursday, the 7th of November 2024 in the Chamber at City Hall. I do not consider any items as urgent, and that's the end. Yay.